crew is staring down at a planet that looks like it's been through a cosmic blender. Seryong, the blazing devil herself, isn't exactly feeling the vibe, questioning if they even have the right coordinates for this absolute wasteland. Sunja is busy playing mechanic with the ship's internals, coolly confirming that the planet's serial number matches their data perfectly, leaving no room for captain-level skepticism. Their red, truck-styled spaceship hangs in the void over the glowing orange husk of Earth, while someone in the back is already losing their mind over Robert apparently sneaking snacks again. Robert is glued to the glass, looking totally baffled by the fact that this radiation-soaked rock with zero oxygen is supposed to be their destination Earth, while Seryun stands behind him looking ready to snap. They're both taking in the view of the burning horizon, and Robert doubles down on the intel, insisting a high-value target from the Black Blood Gang is definitely playing hide-and-seek down there. Seryung looks like she's about to throw hands over a bad lead, but Robert pleads his case, claiming the info was snatched directly from a beggar sex system raid. Seryung turns to their resident robot Sunja for the real talk. Sunja doesn't sugarcoat it, her cold blue eyes focused as she notes that coming to a place like this is basically a fancy way of committing suicide. She drops the grim numbers, pointing out that radiation levels are high enough to melt a normal person, and concluding the planet is basically a giant graveyard. Seryung wonders if any human could actually survive that hellscape. Sunja keeps tinkering, theorizing that with top-tier tech and a massive energy drive, someone might survive for maybe 6 hours at best. Seryung turns to Robert with a look that screams, he better be right. Robert starts sweating bullets as his captain makes it crystal clear that if they land and find nothing, his life is effectively forfeit. Suddenly, Sunja picks up a faint human life sign buried deep underground. The surface of the planet is a nightmare of swirling fire and ruined skylines, a graveyard of a civilization that's been cooking in radiation for ages. Looming through the dust is a massive peak that used to be a legend, Mount Tai, standing tall even after the world ended. Stepping onto the surface with her mask on, Seryun looks up at the peak while Robert explains this is the sacred origin of the Mount Tai star system that the old martial arts masters are always obsessed with. Seryung isn't impressed by the legendary sanctuary tag, looking at the piles of literal trash and debris everywhere, wondering what those Martial Alliance geezers are even doing with their money if they can't clean up their own history. Robert scoffs, calling the old guard all talk and profit-driven while they trek through the ruins. Seryung finally calls a halt, signaling that they've reached the exact coordinates. It looks like a whole lot of nothing in the middle of a dusty plain. But Seryung is confident, standing tall and pointing directly at the ground beneath her boots. She drops into a crouch, focusing her senses on the dirt below while Robert watches on, wondering what kind of explosive move the captain is about to pull. She activates the internal energy drive strapped to her gear, the device humming to life with a high-pitched whine as she prepares to dig deep. Her eyes glow with a fierce green light as her internal energy surges, her hands manifesting a powerful aura that looks ready to tear the earth apart. She's skeptical anyone could survive being buried this deep without suffocating, but she's about to find out. With a massive roar of power, she blasts the ground wide open, sending a pillar of green energy and debris flying into the sky as she uncovers the secret hidden beneath the ruins of Mount Tai. Robert is already stressing out, telling Seryun she needs to give him a heads up next time she decides to blow a hole in the crust so he can actually get out of the way. Seryun doesn't even look at him, just stands there in her combat gear, staring down into the massive dark void she just created. The drop looks endless, like a direct elevator ride to the center of the earth. And Seryung immediately taps her comms to check in with the crew upstairs. She asks Sunja if her scanners are picking up any signs of life at the bottom of the pit. Back on the ship, Sunja is locked in, her blue eyes scanning the holographic data streams as she confirms that there's a pulse, though it's incredibly faint. She notes that there's a massive underground facility or chamber tucked away deep beneath the surface ruins. Robert starts babbling about grabbing an electronic ladder to make the descent safe, but Seryun isn't exactly known for her patience. Before he can even finish his sentence, she just leaps straight into the black abyss without a second thought, leaving him staring in disbelief. Robert can only sigh at his captain's legendary hot temper as he watches her plummet into the darkness, but he doesn't have much of a choice. Seryung's voice echoes back up, telling him to quit stalling and move his ass. They eventually hit the bottom, and it's not just some dusty cave. They're standing in front of a colossal, ornate gateway that looks like it belongs in a myth. Seryun leads the way, looking tiny against the sheer scale of the ancient architecture as Robert follows behind, clearly on edge. The doors are covered in intricate carvings and massive pillars, but the real kicker is the ancient text etched right into the center. It's a chilling warning from Lee Mokchin himself, basically telling the world that he's been sealed away and that death is the only thing waiting for anyone clumsy enough to try and wake him up. Robert is staring up at the symbols like they're a different dimension, totally lost on what any of it means. Seryung isn't wasting time guessing, so she orders Sunja to run a translation on the ancient script. Sunja reports back that the language is roughly 2,000 years old, and the message is pretty clear. It's a direct threat to anyone who dares to open those doors. Robert actually sounds relieved, thinking this confirms the person they're hunting is definitely tucked away inside. Seryung finds it a bit hilarious that someone would write a threat in a language that literally nobody understands anymore. But she tries to stay positive, suggesting it's a good sign they found the right spot, even if the keep out sign is a little intense. To the captain of El Zastevil, a death threat is basically a glowing sign saying there's something valuable inside, so she puts her weight into it and shoves the heavy doors open. She marches right in, leaving a nervous Robert to trail after her into the dark hall. The interior is a massive, dimly lit tomb with pillars stretching up into the shadows, and right in the center of a spotlight sits a figure on a high pedestal. The person is completely covered in a wild, overgrown mess of hair that masks their entire body. Seryung stops at the base of the stairs, her eyes narrowing as she sizes up the target, while Robert is already starting to panic. He's whispering, wondering if that thing on the pedestal is even human or if they've stumbled into something they can't handle. Seryung ignores his whining and starts walking up the stairs, her boots echoing to the silent chamber as she gets closer to the motionless figure. She doesn't hesitate for a second, moving with the kind of confidence that only someone who survived 100 death matches could have. The guy is just sitting there with his legs crossed and his head bowed, looking like he hasn't moved in a millennium. Robert is trying to convince his boss that the guy is just a corpse. Figured there's no way anyone stays alive after being buried for 2,000 years. Seryung gets right in the figure's space, staring intensely at the mess of hair to see if there's any hint of a breath or a heartbeat. She's not convinced by the whole ancient statue vibe and wants to see what's really going on under there. True to her Blazing Devil nickname, she decides that the best way to get an answer is the direct approach. She reaches out with one finger, leaning in to give the legendary Supreme Heavenly Demon a little poke on the nose. For a heartbeat, nothing happens, and Seryung just stands there looking kind of confused, like she expected a bit more of a reaction from a 2,000-year-old monster. Then, the air in the tomb suddenly changes, and purple sparks of raw energy start crackling around Seryung's finger the moment she makes contact. Her eyes go wide as she realizes she might have just touched something she shouldn't have. A massive explosion of purple energy erupts from the pedestal, blowing the air out of the room and forcing Seryung back. Through the chaos and the flying hair, two glowing red eyes snap open, signaling that the slumber is officially over. Seryung tries to attack to save herself, but it was no use. Robert's face turns into a literal scream mask as a pillar of blinding white-hot energy geysers out of the hole they were in. The golden inferno doesn't stop. The beam of light tears through the planet's atmosphere like a cosmic needle piercing the heavens. Back on the ship, Sunja is witnessing the unthinkable as a massive swirl of energy, looking like a beam. The technical specialist is losing her cool, screaming into her headset as her screens go haywire with interference. While down in the tomb, the comms are dead, and the room is filled with choking dust. We did a grim look at Seryung's mask, now splattered with fresh blood. She's lying motionless and broken on the cold stone floor nearby in the shifting mist. Seryung is slumped against the wall, gasping for air and looking dazed, while poor Robert is completely face down and out for the count, looking like he never even saw the hit coming. Her pupils shrink to pinpricks as she looks up, her vision finally clearing enough to realize that the massive, hairy mountain of a man isn't just a corpse he's standing right over her. The scale of the threat becomes terrifyingly clear as the creature looms in the shadows, his voice echoing with an ancient, murderous authority that demands to know who dared to disturb his sleep. Looking like a cute cornered animal against the wall, Seryung can only stare upward as the sheer weight of the stranger's presence fills every corner of the room. The figure stands tall over the wreckage of the bounty hunter crew, questioning if the world has finally produced a warrior worth his time or if this is just a pathetic challenge from a weakling. He leans in closer, the oppressive silence of the tomb amplifying the threat as he demands a response, his long, unkempt hair swaying with a life of its own in the stagnant air. Seryung can't make heads or tails of the archaic dialect he's speaking, frantically tapping her suit to activate her real-time translation mode, just as the figure promises her a swift death for her silence. Pure confusion hits her hard as she tries to process the sudden threat of execution, while the ancient master raises a weathered, skeletal hand on air. Panicking and labeling the guy a complete monster, Seryong lets her combat instincts take over, unleashing a massive surge of blue electric energy that turns the entire chamber into a blazing furnace. She isn't holding back an ounce of power, screaming for the thing to die as she spams her most powerful energy blasts, creating a chain reaction of explosions that shakes the entire mountain. The sheer force of her desperation blows the massive stone doors right off their hinges, leaving the captain standing in a thick cloud of smoke, praying she actually managed to finish the job. Her HUD starts screaming about a drive overload and her internal energy being nearly tapped out. But as the smoke clears, her heart drops into her stomach. Not a single strand of hair on the guy's head, on the guy's body, has been singed by her ultimate attack, and he's standing there as if she'd just blown a light breeze his way, leaving Seryong absolutely speechless. With a terrifying, analytical calm, Lee Mokjin breaks down her entire fighting style, mocking her for using impure stolen arts from the MA sect, and labeling her as nothing more than a common grave robber as his eyes glow with a hellish red light. Lee Mokjin is floating in the center of a swirling vortex of purple energy, his feet barely touching the ground. The captain of the S-Devil crew is completely paralyzed by the sight, staring up at the ancient master who looks more like a force of nature than a man. The tomb can't even contain his aura, and a massive cross-shaped pillar of light erupts through the chamber, blasting Sarang backward as Lee Mokjin roars about the audacity of thieves disrupting his 2,000-year sleep. Seryong hits the floor hard, clutching the ground as she tries to figure out how to survive a Grand Master-level execution. But just as the tension hits its peak, the terrifying fuzzball of hair suddenly loses all its momentum and faceplants directly into the dust with a dull thud. The captain just sits there, blinking in total confusion at the pile of hair that was threatening to erase her existence seconds ago. She catches her breath and stares at the motionless body, assuming that the ancient warrior finally succumbed to the radiation of the modern world, or just died of old age the moment he moved. Robert, who was pretending to be dead, finally to pick himself up, clutching his shoulder and limping over to Seryong's side while looking completely drained. He gasps out that it's only natural for the thing to be dead, considering it was exposed to lethal radiation without any kind of shielding field for who knows how long. Back on the ship, Sunja is coolly monitoring the situation through her high-tech scanners, her blue eyes tracking every life sign with robotic precision. She cuts through the crew's relief, informing them that the target is very much alive with a normal pulse and steady breathing. He simply collapsed because his energy is completely tapped out. Robert is stunned by the news, but Sunja doubles down, explaining that while his physical body is in perfect shape, the battery inside his stomach has been drained to zero. Seryong and Robert share a look of pure bewilderment, trying to wrap their heads around the idea of an ancient martial artist having a battery in his gut. The two of them stand over the face-down fuzzball in the middle of the empty, desolate tomb, processing the most ridiculous anticlimax in history. It turns out the supreme heavenly demon didn't fall to a curse or a wound. He literally just fainted because he was starving to death after 2 millennia of napping. Later, the S-Devil ship hauling tail away from the asteroid. Inside, Robert is absolutely losing his mind, screaming at Seryong for her insane decision to actually bring the monster on board instead of leaving him in his hole. He's pacing around the cargo hold like a caged animal, comparing the fainted master to a radioactive cockroach that's only going to cause more trouble. He's completely convinced that they've invited a disaster onto their ship, especially after seeing that terrifying display of power earlier. Seryong just stands there with her arms crossed, her red-streaked hair framing a face that's surprisingly calm despite Robert's mental breakdown. She ignores his whining and looks him dead in the eye, dropping the only logic that matters to a bounty hunter. The guy is worth a fortune. They look down at the center of the bay, where they've got the ancient Grandmaster wrapped up in thick tapes like a giant, hairy mummy. Seryong is already seeing credit symbols, knowing that a living relic from the golden age of martial arts is the ultimate jackpot. She quizzes her crew on the current market, asking what the most valuable cultural heritage in the galaxy is right now. Sunja doesn't miss a beat, explaining that ancient martial arts techniques are the height of luxury, and the closer you get to the original source, the higher the price tag climbs. Seryong thinks back to the records of the legendary era 2,000 years ago, a time when masters like Lee Mokjin were basically gods walking the earth. Sunja confirms that even the most basic F-grade scraps of knowledge from that time period start at a cool 10,000 credits, making their guest priceless. Robert starts to see the vision, realizing that if this guy is an S-rank martial artist, they're set for life. Seryong shuts him down, telling him he's still thinking way too small, because this fuzzball isn't just S-rank. He's an unimaginable grandmaster who operates on a level the modern world has forgotten. Robert is still shaking, worried about what happens when the unimaginable grandmaster decides he's had enough of being a mummy. Siryaun brushes it off, bragging that she used celestial silkworm thread designed for heavy spaceship repairs, claiming not even a Shaolin sect leader could break out of it. The captain is feeling pretty smug about her handiwork until she leans in close and hears a sharp, terrifying ripping sound coming from the bundle. Her eyes go wide as her confidence evaporates in an instant, realizing that the unbreakable thread is currently being shredded like wet tissue paper. The bindings explode outward in a flurry of white silk, and the hairy figure stands up in the middle of the floor, completely unfazed by the restraints. The air in the cargo bay immediately turns heavy as the supreme heavenly demon returns to his feet, no longer interested in sleeping. A violent, purple inferno of energy erupts from Lee Mochin's body, lighting up the entire ship as he looms over the crew with pure, unadulterated malice. He calls them lowly grave robbers and promises to tear them to shreds for the insult of trying to bind him like a common prisoner. Robert goes into a full-blown panic, sliding into a defensive position and screaming that he knew this was going to happen the moment they touched that tomb. Siryaun drops into a combat stance, her eyes narrow as she realizes the payday she worked so hard for is about to try and turn her ship into a flying coffin, instead of some epic battle to the death. Our technical genius Sunja decides to handle the terrifying hairball the old-fashioned way, through his stomach. She walks right up to the pulsing purple aura of the supreme heavenly demon, carrying a literal mountain of hot, glistening sausages. We are talking about a tray stacked high with premium, perfectly grilled franks that would make any starving man lose his mind. And honestly, the grease alone probably carries more power than Siryaun's energy blasts. Siryaun and Robert can only watch in absolute stunned silence as the legendary monster drops the act and starts vacuuming the sausages like a competitive eater. The guy is faceplanting into the tray, shoving links into his mouth with both hands, because 2,000 years of sleep apparently works up a massive appetite. Siryaun is totally caught off guard, asking Sunja how she even predicted this move, but the Sunja just gives her a deadpan look. According to her analysis, the guy wasn't just acting crazy. He's been starving for 2 millennia, and his internal battery was basically screaming for a recharge. Sunja calmly points out that the best thing for a hungry beast is a big pile of meat, and the logic checks out because Lee Mojin is currently ignoring everything else just to chew. As the ship streaks through the vacuum of space past a massive glowing planet, probably the Earth, the S-Devil crew's custom red rig keeps cruising while the ancient martial artist finally takes a breather from his meal. He starts to piece things together, realizing that the people he thought were disrespectful, grave robbers, are actually just a bunch of accidental bounty hunters who stumbled onto his tomb. Sitting at the mess hall table like a very confused guest, Lee Mochin tries to wrap his ancient brain around the fact that 2,000 years have passed since his time. He's listening to the story of how humans basically trashed the planet with their constant fighting and eventually decided to pack up and live among the stars. Siryaun leans, looking casual in her tight gear, and explains that things have actually stabilized quite a bit since the world ended. She tells him that the New World government decided to ban all heavy-duty hardware, including nuclear weapons, making martial arts the top-tier way to settle scores again. Lee Mochin just stares at her, completely lost on the concept of a nuclear weapon. So Siryaun drops the big one on him. She casually mentions that they are currently living in the year 1505 of the galactic calendar, which is a pretty huge jump from whatever era he crawled out of. The realization hits him hard. The idea of living in the sky is absolute madness to a guy from the old world, and he's not taking it well. He slams his fists onto the table with enough force to rattle the whole room, screaming that it's all nonsense and demanding to know who these third-rate thieves think they're lying to. He starts flaring that purple energy again, hair flying everywhere as he threatens to end them for trying to trick a legend like him. But instead of panicking this time, the crew just gives him a synchronized point toward the window, directing his attention to the massive viewing port behind them. Lee Mochin stops mid-rant and slowly turns his head, his curiosity finally getting the better of his temper. Siryaun doesn't miss a beat, calling him master or grandpa while pointing out the window at the celestial body they're orbiting. She tells him flat out that the giant rock out there is actually his old home, Earth, and it's a lot different than he remembers. The supreme heavenly demon is officially shook, staring at the planet Earth as it glows with an eerie, irradiated light. Siryaun confirms his suspicion with a calm look, telling him that yeah, that's his world, it's just totally ruined and uninhabitable now. He presses his hands against the cold glass in disbelief, leaning in as if he can see his old sect from up here, but the reality of the situation is finally sinking in. He's muttering to himself, struggling to accept the fact that the land he used to walk on was actually round this whole time. Siryaun just facepalms at how incredibly ignorant this ancient grandmaster is, but her annoyance is quickly replaced by a much more physical problem. Robert is the first to notice it, cringing as a truly foul odor starts to drift off their guest's matted 2,000-year-old hair. A visible cloud of stench starts radiating from Lee Mo-jin, and it's so bad that Seryung has to pinch her nose just to keep from gagging. She tells him that since they're going to be roommates for a while, his first order of business is getting a serious shower and a much-needed haircut. Lee Mo-jin doesn't even know what a shower is, but the promise of a bath sounds good enough to get him moving toward the decontamination unit. The crew stands outside the glowing neon sign of the ship's bathhouse, probably praying the plumbing can handle whatever ancient grime is about to be washed off. Inside, the water starts blasting, and we can see the silhouette of the legend finally getting scrubbed clean after a couple of millennia of neglect. Standing outside the door, Robert is still questioning why Seryung didn't just leave the guy's hair alone, probably worried about what's hiding underneath all that fuzz. But as the pile of wet hair falls on the shower floor, it's clear that the supreme heavenly demon is about to get a major transformation. Robert and Seryung are posted up, Robert looking like he's expecting a literal mummy to come shambling out of the mist, while Seryung just keeps her arms crossed, waiting for the results of the extreme makeover. The tension breaks when a pair of bare feet finally steps onto the tile, followed by a view of a lean, shredded torso being dried off with a simple white towel as steam rolls out of the room. Then comes the big reveal, and the hairy caveman is gone, replaced by a fresh-faced Lee Mo-jin with clean-cut black hair, looking way too handsome for a guy who's been dead for 2 millennia, casually asking for a second helping of those sausages he liked, while the rest of the crew stands there completely stunned. Seryung's brain basically short-circuits as she stares at this total stranger, her eyes going wide as she tries to reconcile the handsome youth in front of her with the monster she just captured. Later, their ship blasts off into the deep void of space. Mo-jin doesn't seem to care about the awkward stares, instead pressing his hands against the glass to witness the celestial fire of a meteor shower, reflecting on how he once thought his old world was narrow when this new reality is actually vast and terrifyingly beautiful. Seryung isn't convinced by the pretty face though, getting right in his space and pinching his cheek like she's checking for fruit ripeness, making sure he isn't some high-tech hologram or a sophisticated robot double. She grills him on his actual age, making it clear that sleep years don't count towards his seniority, while Robert and Sunja watch from the controls, completely agreeing that there is absolutely nothing normal about the guy's vibe or his biology. The crew eventually pulls up to a massive rock in the Pleiades cluster, heading straight for a place called the Asteroid Space Tavern to find some answers, and maybe a way to offload their legendary merchandise. Sunja's robotic eyes scan the area as they enter the Wild Crane Inn, a massive, neon-drenched subterranean hub where the air is thick with illegal deals and the smell of expensive fuel. Once they find a booth, Mo-jin goes straight back to his favorite hobby, his eyes narrowing with intense focus as he begins inhaling a massive mountain of sausages like it's his last meal on Earth. Robert watches the food disappear with a horrified expression, wondering how a human stomach can even hold that much volume. But Sunja just points out that the guy hasn't had a snack in 2,000 years, so he's basically just catching up on lost time. While the ancient demon eats them out of house and home, the keeper of the inn, Wang the 18th, watches from the shadows, his tiny blue sunglasses reflecting the dim light as he prepares for a meeting with the legendary Blazing Devil. Inside a private room guarded by silent warriors, Seryung takes a seat across from Wang's massive high-backed throne, confirming she needs a broker who's got deep pockets and a thicker skin because she's sitting on the find of the century. Wang takes a slow drag from his cigar or whatever, intrigued that a mid-tier hunter is acting this frantic, but his cool demeanor cracks when Seryung mentions she has a full collection of S-rank original martial arts manuscripts from the ancient era. The room goes silent as the implications sink in, a thick cloud of smoke hanging in the air while Wang's eyes go wide, realizing the sheer scale of the power and wealth she's claiming to hold. Even the guards are internally losing it, knowing that if those scrolls are legit, the market for martial history is about to be flipped upside down because those things are basically the holy grail of their universe. But then Wang drops the hammer, telling her the value is 0 credits. A statement so absurd it leaves the guards questioning if the boss has finally lost his mind or if he's playing a very dangerous game. He doubles down, blowing smoke and explaining that a single one of those books could buy an entire planet, making it impossible for a mere bounty hunter like her to have found a whole stack of them. So he assumes she's just a liar and wants her tossed out immediately. Seryung ignores the disrespect for now and heads back to the main floor, asking Robert about Sunja's whereabouts while he informs her that their tech expert is out grabbing supplies for their next leg of the journey. Seryung is actually feeling pretty good, bragging about how the broker is going to hit them up as soon as a buyer is found. But her triumph turns to disbelief when she looks at the table and sees Mokjin slumped over a literal graveyard of empty plates, having finished every single bite. The door creaks open on a scene that's way too much for a Tuesday as Robert hovers over a completely drained Suryoung. He's relieved their high-maintenance guest finally stopped eating, but Suryoung is just face-planted on the table, muttering about how the only thing keeping her from quitting this crazy job is the mountain of credits she's hoping to see. The Wild Crane Inn is buzzing with its usual crowd of sketchy spacers and low-rent martial artists, all tucked into booths under flickering neon signs. It's the kind of place where you mind your own business unless you're looking for a funeral, but the vibe is about to get a whole lot heavier. Suddenly, the tavern door isn't just opening, it's being dominated as a squad of absolute units in purple-trimmed cloaks marches in. These guys have the word demon literally engraved on their gear, and leading them is a massive bald man with a goatee and tech scars that scream he doesn't do negotiations, leaving Suryoung looking back in total shock. The realization hits like a freight train. This isn't just some random gang, it's the Heavenly Demon Sect. The leader stands there with an aura so thick you could cut it with a blade, radiating the kind of authority that makes the air in the room feel thin. He's not just looking around. He's calculating, his eyes scanning the room with a tactical HUD that pinpoints every living soul in the booths. He's searching for something, and he doesn't care who sees him doing it. Suryoung and Robert go full ninja, ducking behind the partition and peeking out with wide eyes. They've recognized the big man as Sanjian Ryue, the legendary leader of the Red Wolf Squad, the elite inspectors and trackers of the Demon Sect, and Robert's #1 rule right now is to not make eye contact. But of course, Lee Mokjin has zero concept of laying low, standing up in the middle of a graveyard of empty plates and asking if they really just mentioned the Heavenly Demon Sect. Suryoung looks like she wants to crawl into a hole and die as the ancient Grandmaster ruins their cover. Suryoung tries to scold him, asking how he even knows that name after being a popsicle for 2 millennia, but Mokjin is genuinely floored that the sect still exists. He looks around at the regular patrons sipping their drinks and wonders why everyone isn't running for their lives in a blind panic. Suryoung drops the ultimate plot twist. The Heavenly Demon Sect isn't the neighborhood nightmare anymore. They actually pride themselves as the top-tier orthodox sect in the entire universe. Mokjin's brain is doing backflips trying to process how the demons became the good guys. While Mokjin is having an existential crisis, Sanjian Ryue is standing in the center of the room, internally reflecting on his life's work. He's thinking about how his distant, seemingly impossible dream of a regulated martial world has actually come true. He stands tall, looking like a total powerhouse as he surveys the tavern, his cybernetic eye glowing with a sense of accomplishment, while the regular people around him go about their business. He zeroes in on a shady guy in a cap trying to disappear into his seat, looming over him like an approaching storm. He doesn't ask nicely, he simply commands the man to look up. A quick scan reveals the guy is a 2-bit criminal with a 5-star technique, wanted for robbery and assault. But Sanjian just sighs. He tells the terrified thief it's his lucky day because he isn't the high-level target they're actually hunting. He delivers a chilling ultimatum, telling the crook to go turn himself in to the Martial Alliance immediately or face the consequences. The thief is shaking so hard he might rattle apart, looking up at the commander in pure terror. Then, the unthinkable happens. A hand reaches out and starts casually rubbing Sanjian's bald head. It's Lee Mokjin, standing there with a serene, almost patronizing smile, calling the most feared tracker in the galaxy admirable. The entire tavern goes into a state of frozen shock, with coffee being spilled and menus being dropped. Sanjian is still caught in his own thoughts about the young ones making his dream a reality, not yet processing that someone is literally treating his head like a crystal ball. Mokjin gets surprisingly emotional, patting the leader's head and wondering aloud how much suffering these kids must have endured to reach such a high and righteous stature. He's treating a Grandmaster-level hunter like a hard-working toddler. The petty criminal is just staring in disbelief while Sanjian finally snaps back to reality, his face darkening with a rage that could level the building. He asks, with terrifying calmness, if this kid is actually missing a few brain cells. Robert jumps in, sweating bullets and waving his hands, trying to claim Mokjin just has bad social skills to prevent a massacre. But Mokjin doubles down, telling Sanjian he's lucky too. Because if Mokjin had sensed even a spark of martial energy from him, he would have already been shattered into pieces. The tension reaches a breaking point with a massive, thudding heartbeat sound effect. Sanjian's back is a roadmap of bulging muscles and popping veins as he vibrates with fury, and the entire tavern is left wondering why he hasn't turned the kid into red mist yet. Robert and Suryoung are practically sweating through their clothes at this point, completely baffled by Mokjin's lack of a survival instinct. They're watching this train wreck in slow motion, wondering if the kid is actually insane or just that confident. Sanjin is absolutely vibrating with pure rage, his veins looking like a roadmap on his arms as his internal energy drive system kicks into high gear. The QIOS is screaming as it activates the Bloodwolf demon art, pushing his output to the absolute limit. The big man roars at Mokchin to quit the games, unleashing a torrent of purple energy that threatens to blow the roof off the entire tavern. It's not just a flex, it's a death sentence for anyone caught in the radius of Asura. The regulars are losing their minds, dropping their drinks and freezing mid-meal as the shockwaves ripple through the room. This wasn't on the menu for lunch, and most of these guys are realizing they're way too close to the blast zone. The Red Wolf squad and the rest of the crew are just standing there, paralyzed by the sheer intensity of the power leveling up right in front of them. It's a total standoff, but only one side is actually doing any of the heavy lifting. Saranj and Robert exchange a look of genuine concern, noting that Sanjin looks like he's about to have a literal meltdown. The big guy is so consumed by his own energy that he looks like he's on the verge of falling apart. Sanjin screams at the top of his lungs, demanding to know who this nobody is, especially since his cybernetic HUD is giving him absolutely nothing. His scanners are glitching because they can't find a single drop of internal energy or a matching database entry for a natural being this powerful. Mokchin just stands there looking bored, casually identifying the technique as the Bloodwolf demon art. He notes that it's actually a pretty low-tier skill from the Heavenly Demon Body Cultivation Arts, though he gives a tiny bit of credit for it surviving this long. With the ultimate level of disrespect, Mokchin tells the massive warrior that his chi is a mess and his training method is a total joke. He's basically looking down on him like a disappointed teacher offering to personally fix the guy's flawed technique. That's the final straw for Sanjin, who lunges forward like a heat-seeking missile with a face full of murder. He's putting every ounce of his hatred into this next move, aiming to delete Mokchin from existence. He screams out the name of his first form, the Red Wolf Strike, and a massive arc of flaming energy claws through the air. It's a direct hit that looks like it should have turned the kid into charcoal. A massive explosion rocks the tavern, sending debris flying everywhere and masking the area in thick smoke. But as the dust settles, Mokchin is seen casually stepping out of the line of fire like he's going for a light stroll. Sanjin goes into a total panic, spamming his tremor wave and ghost claw forms in a desperate attempt to land even a single scratch. He's throwing everything he's got, but the speed difference is becoming painfully obvious to everyone watching. Even mid-air, Sanjin tries to keep his forms precise, showing off his years of training and raw internal power. But from Mokchin's perspective, the guy is basically moving in slow motion, lacking the soul behind the movements. Just as Sanjin prepares one final desperate lunge, Mokchin decides he's had enough of the noise. He moves faster than the eye can follow, reaching out and planting his palm firmly on top of the big man's bald head. With a single word and zero effort, Mokchin calls the display crude and slams Sanjin's head straight into the floor. The impact is so violent, it shatters the stone tiles, creating a massive crater that swallows the warrior whole. The silence that follows is deafening as the Red Wolf squad stares at the hole in the ground where their leader used to be. The shock on their faces says it all. They've never seen anyone handle their captain like a misbehaving toddler. Even the tavern patrons and the rest of the crew are frozen in disbelief, processing the fact that an S-rank threat was just turned into floor decor. Saryong and Robert are just happy they aren't the ones in the crater. Sanjin is left completely incapacitated, his body buried headfirst in the rubble, while his purple cape flutters uselessly in the air. It's the ultimate humiliation for a man who thought he was at the top of the food chain. Mokchin stands over the defeated leader, looking entirely unimpressed by the whole ordeal. He delivers one final lecture, telling the unconscious man that he only learned his arts like a parrot, forgetting that true martial arts are about adapting and making a technique your own. Mokchin is literally standing over the crater he made, casually pointing at the elite squad members like he's their frustrated PE teacher. He's basically telling these supposed killers to quit being lazy, get off the floor, and try hitting him again if they've got any pride left. That was definitely the wrong thing to say, because the remaining platoon leaders lose their absolute minds and charge him all at once. They're screaming about how a brat like him shouldn't dare disrespect them, launching a full-scale, multi-directional assault with enough killing intent to level the entire room. Cut to the Heavenly Demon Sect's headquarters in District 32, which looks like a massive high-tech Death Star floating in the void of space. Inside the facility, the grand battle ended in about 2 seconds because the entire Red Wolf squad is now face down on the tiles, completely out for the count. District 32 Commander Jong Ritak is looking at the scene with a face that says his entire career just flashed before his eyes. He's standing by as his top-tier soldiers are checked over by medical droids just to see if their brains are still inside their skulls. The medical bay is a total disaster zone filled with stretchers and groaning elite warriors who used to be the sect's pride and joy. Jong Retak stands there with his hands behind his back, soaking in the sheer scale of the embarrassment, while his men are carted off like yesterday's trash. One of the officials tries to look on the bright side, mentioning that the guys only have severe bruising and their lives aren't in danger. Jong Retak isn't feeling the optimism at all, staring out at the massive industrial towers of his district and wondering how fortunate it actually is that they live to remember being clapped this hard. Mokchin's face is all over the monitors now, looking way too innocent for someone who just hospitalized a whole platoon of killers. Senior Elder Jo Chunrock is having a full-blown midlife crisis over it, unable to wrap his head around how a random stranger just walked in and dismantled their finest. The Elder wants to know if this kid is some legendary figure hiding in the Martial Alliance database. But the search comes up with a big fat 0. He's a total ghost in the system, though his travel buddies are a different story since they actually bother to register their identities. It turns out his ride is that flashy red truck ship owned by S-Devil, a group of mid-tier bounty hunters who usually stay in their lane. Normally, these guys are just space janitors who clean up low-level thugs and B-class criminals, definitely nothing that would ever catch the sect's attention until today. The group is led by the blazing devil herself, Seryung, who looks like she's already regretting every life choice that led her to this moment. Meanwhile, Mokchin is sitting at the dining table with his fork and knife ready, looking like a hungry middle schooler who's tired of waiting for his dinner to be served. Seryung and Robert are just standing there in the background, awkwardly watching their secret weapon behave like a kid in a cafeteria. On the sect's end, they've already locked onto their location and are tracking the ship through space, knowing exactly where the blazing devil is hiding her new monster. The Elder is ready to pull the trigger and send a whole pursuit fleet to hunt them down, but Jong Retak shuts that down fast. He's got a personal grudge now and decides he's going to handle this mess personally rather than letting more subordinates get their pride shattered. The Elder can only bow in respect, knowing the commander is dead serious when he gets that sharp look in his eye. The atmosphere in the command center is heavy with the kind of tension that usually precedes a planetary-scale disaster. Jong Retak steps up to the console and slams a button to open a secure channel, but the screen just greets him with a wall of colorful static and digital noise. It's the universal sign that someone powerful is about to show up and complicate his afternoon. The static clears to reveal a massive hologram of Kim Sung-balm, the leader of the Greenwood Group's Galaxy Division. Jong Retak looks tiny compared to the projection, but his expression doesn't soften even a little bit as they face off across the digital bridge. Kim Sung-balm is all smiles behind those round glasses, acting like he's just catching up with an old friend while Jong Retak stares him down with pure intensity. The commander is basically a walking scar at this point, radiating a vibe that says he has zero time for corporate small talk. Back on the ship, Seryung is staring out into the cosmic void, probably wondering if she should just keep flying until they hit another dimension. On the other side of the call, Jong Retak asks if Kim Sung-balm has a specific request for the Greenwood Group that involves the kid on his screens. The S-Devil ship is absolutely hauling through hyperspace, leaving streaks of blue light in its wake as it jumps across the sector. Inside, Mokchin is still at that table, looking profoundly depressed because his plate is still empty and the Grandmaster of the martial world is currently being defeated by hunger. Seryung and Robert finally walk over to join him at the table, which actually looks pretty fancy with a red cloth and a single rose in a vase. The vibe is incredibly tense though, like a family dinner where everyone knows someone just committed a felony and nobody wants to talk about it. Robert leans in and whispers to Seryung, asking her to be honest about being just as terrified of Mokchin as he is. Seryung snaps at him instantly, trying to keep up her tough captain act even though her stressed out eyes say she's definitely thinking about the exact same thing. Robert is absolutely losing his mind, sweating bullets as he reminds Seryung that the guys Mokchin just wiped the floor with were A-rank elites from the Red Wolf platoon. He saw it with his own eyes. Mokchin didn't even break a sweat, just a single casual slap to put those high-tier warriors in the dirt. We get a clear look at the carnage. Mokchin is standing there like he's just taking a breezy walk in the park while elite warriors are literally embedded into the stone pillars of the room. It wasn't a fight, it was a total cleanup, and the Supreme Heavenly Demon treated them like nothing more than annoying gnats. Seryung is trying to keep her cool, acting like she's not impressed and claiming she could have taken those guys if she actually got serious, even if they were top-tier air ranks. Robert, on the other hand, is much more realistic, admitting that even with his special forces training, he'd be lucky to leave a scratch on them even if he put his entire life on the line. Robert is still rambling about how Mokjin swatted them aside like flies, but Sureshang has had enough of the talk and marches straight over to where the monster is sitting. Mokjin is just hanging out at a dining table with a fancy red cloth, fork and knife in hand, looking like he's waiting for a 5-star meal instead of hiding from the authorities. Our hot-tempered captain slams her hands onto the table, leaning in close and demanding a face-to-face conversation right now. Mokjin barely even looks up, staring back with those deadpan eyes that suggest he's far more interested in his empty plate than her interrogation. Mokjin is a man of simple needs, telling her that food comes first, but Seryun isn't about to play games and flops down into the chair across from him, insisting they talk immediately. She gets right to the point, aggressively demanding to know his name while Robert hovers in the back, terrified. Robert is desperately whispering for her to use some honorifics before they all end up like the Red Wolf guys. But Seryun just shouts at Mokjin again, asking if he's deaf. Just as Sunja rolls in with a mountain of steaming hot dogs that could feed an entire army, Seryun shuts the whole operation down. She stops the food delivery dead in its tracks, telling Mokjin he isn't getting a single bite until he opens his mouth and starts explaining himself. Mokjin looks absolutely devastated, staring at that pile of meat, while Robert keeps trying to save their lives by pointing out that even a dog gets peace and quiet during mealtime. Seryun doesn't care about canine etiquette, she just wants her answers. Finally, the man of the hour speaks his name, Lee Molchanan Serial, leans in, demanding to know his true identity and what kind of job he used to have back in the day. There's a heavy, suffocating silence hanging in the air as they stare each other down, Seryung's fiery intensity clashing with Moshin's absolute lack of any readable emotion. Then, he drops the bombshell that's about to change everything, calmly stating that he is the heavenly demon, the supreme heavenly demon to be exact. Seryun's brain basically short-circuits as she stares at him, wondering what kind of nonsense this guy is spouting, or if they accidentally fed him bad hot dogs that are making him hallucinate. Before she can call him out on his delusions, the whole ship starts screaming with red emergency lights and blaring sirens. Something has just locked onto them, and it's definitely not looking for a friendly chat. Sunja reports from her terminal that they are being targeted at point-blank range, sending Seryung into a spiral, thinking the Heavenly Demon sect has already tracked them down for revenge after the earlier beatdown. But Sunja delivers even worse news: it's not the sect. The technical scanners confirm it's Greenwood, and a massive skull and crossbones emblem fills the entire view screen. Outside in the cold vacuum of space, a massive fleet of pyramid-shaped pirate ships has completely surrounded the tiny S-double vessel. Inside the bridge of the lead ship, a bald man stands with his hands behind his back, watching his prey through the glass window. This is Kim Sung-bom, the Black Tiger of the Crescent Moon, and leader of the Greenwood Galaxy Division. And his men are already asking for permission to fire an EMP capture round to disable the bounty hunter's ship. Kim Sung-bom listens as his subordinate confirms that Seryung's Blazing Devil crew are indeed the targets they've been investigating on the outskirts of the galaxy. He's genuinely confused why a powerhouse like the Heavenly Demon sect would even bother with a tiny, small-time group like this, while a massive hologram of the District 32 commander, Jong Ritak, watches the whole scene unfold. Kim Sung-bom is all smiles as he officially accepts the bounty, but he's curious about the fine print and what exactly the clients want done once the target is in his hands. The response from the hologram is cold and immediate. The District 32 commander Jong Ritak wants no prisoners, just total erasure from existence, which even makes a seasoned bandit like Kim Sung-bom pause. He starts smelling a rat because the Heavenly Demon sect is way better at killing than his crew, so he figures there has to be a nasty trap waiting for him inside that red ship. Out in the void, the scale of the threat becomes clear as dozens of skull-marked pirate ships completely surround the S-Devil's lone truck ship, cutting off every possible exit. Inside the cockpit, Robert is still under the delusion that they're just dealing with some common robbers. But Seryung knows they're too broke for a fleet this big to be interested in their wallets. Seryung tries to keep the energy up by claiming they'll just beat the intruders and toss them out like trash, while Mokjin stands by looking completely baffled by the high-tech drama. Sunja drops the hammer with the technical data, revealing that this isn't just a random raid. The entire Galaxy division of the 72 strongholds has been mobilized for them. The realization hits Seryung hard that the big boss himself, Black Tiger Kim Sung-bom, is likely leading this massive fleet, and even her hot temper can't hide the fact that she's outmatched. Robert starts panicking in chibi mode, telling Seryung she'd be dead in 3 moves as she tried to fight, and suggests they just surrender immediately since they have zero pride left anyway. Seryung tries to regain her dignity by permitting the enemy to use their EMP capture rounds and board the ship, acting like she's the one calling the shots on their own surrender. She's ready to let them search the whole place and even donate their survival gear, while Robert points out the obvious that her plan is literally just surrendering with extra steps. Seryung tells Moxjin to stay back and not interfere, confidently explaining that space laws protect them from being blasted by the fleet's heavy weapons. That confidence evaporates in a second when Sunja's scanners go haywire, revealing that the weapon locking onto them isn't a non-lethal EMP, but a ship-shredding photon cannon. The lead pirate ship opens its central core, glowing with a terrifying golden light, as it prepares to fire a beam designed to turn everything in its path to atoms. Seryung can't believe they're actually trying to kill them, while even Kim Sung-bom's subordinates are sweating over how much this violates every space regulation in the book. Kim Sung-bom doesn't care about the rules. His gut is telling him to blow them to dust right now and just blame the whole messy aftermath on the heavenly demon sect. He gives the order to fire without a hint of mercy, just as Seryung screams for a warp jump, only for Sunja to remind her they're boxed in from every single direction. It gets even worse when Sunja reveals the shields are totally offline because the crew sold the expensive parts just to cover their basic living expenses and rent. With the photon cannon fully charged and humming with lethal energy, Kim Sung-bom gives the final command to fire, sealing the fate of the tiny red ship. Seryung and Sunja can only watch in absolute horror as a massive, blinding beam of destruction erupts from the pirate fleet, swallowing their defenseless ship in a wave of light. Robert is absolutely losing his mind, screaming his lungs out as that massive energy beam charges up, while Mochin just stands there looking like a deer in headlights, probably wondering if he's about to be turned into space dust before he even gets a second course. The photon cannon goes off with a blinding, world-ending flash, lighting up the entire sector as the Greenwood fleet watches the fireworks show they just started, and Kim Sung-bom stands tall on his bridge, thinking he's finally scrubbed the cockroaches from his to-do list. Kim Sung-bom is all business until something impossible catches his eye, making his pupils shrink in pure, unfiltered shock as he realizes his massive kill shot didn't actually kill anything. Out of the literal heart of the explosion, this insane truck-looking battleship comes barreling through the flames like it's a Sunday drive, completely unfazed by a blast that should have vaporized a planet. This armored beast of a ship dives straight through the sea of fire, positioning itself like a shield over the S-Devil's disc-shaped vessel while the surrounding pirate fleet gets tossed around by the wake of the explosion. Just when things couldn't get more metal, this towering woman in sleek white armor steps out onto the hull of her ship, her long hair flowing as she stares down an entire fleet of pirate pyramids, while inside the S-Devil ship, Seryung is literally clutching Sunya in a panic, wondering what kind of monster just gatecrashed their funeral. Kim Sung-bom recognizes her instantly, calling her the 8-foot fighting ghost, and we finally get a good look at Elena, standing there like a goddess of war in her high-tech white suit, wielding a blade that looks ready to slice through the vacuum of space itself. Mochin is pressed right up against the glass with wide eyes, totally mesmerized by the silver-haired warrior outside, while Robert and Seryung look like they've seen a ghost, paralyzed by the sheer pressure of an S-class bounty hunter just chilling on their doorstep. Elena isn't even breaking a sweat, turning her back on the massive pirate fleet as if their entire firepower is just a light breeze, walking with a calm that's more terrifying than the cannon blast. Kim Sung-bom is sweating bullets now, wondering why on earth she's interfering, especially since Elena looks like she's about to turn him into a very expensive stain on his own deck. His tech guys are rambling about terraformation-grade shields and recharging the photon cannon to max power, but Kim Sung-bom isn't taking any chances with a monster this big, so he snaps his mask on and orders an immediate teleportation to the surface to handle things personally. Elena just stands there, a lone white shadow against the blue void, while Robert frantically explains to the crew that she's an unpredictable S-class nightmare that even the big sect leaders try to avoid. Seryung is staring at the back of the woman who just saved their lives, her mind spinning because if that truck hadn't tanked the photon beam, the whole crew would currently be nothing more than floating atoms. Light swirls on the platform as Kim Sung-bom teleports down, landing right in front of Elena and trying to keep things civil with a greeting like they're just bumping into each other at a family reunion. Elena doesn't even move an inch, her icy gaze fixed on her brother as he reminds her that he's Kim Sung-bom, her 55th younger brother who saw her at their mother's birthday 2 years ago, but she just gives him a cold 2-word response to get lost. You can see the irritation flare in Kim Sung-bom's eyes behind his glasses, and he drops the brotherly act immediately, formally reintroducing himself as the big boss of the Galaxy Division of the 72 Strongholds of Greenwood. He tries to talk big, saying that telling him to beat it is the same as insulting the entirety of Greenwood, and he's not about to take that lying down. But Elena just responds by igniting her internal energy, turning the whole area into a terrifying red aura. Seryung is watching the standoff from behind the safety of the glass, noting that even for a group as big as Greenwood, picking a fight with his woman is a total suicide mission, and it looks like things are about to get very violent. Machin watches the red light flare up, and Seryung mentions that if Elena gets serious, her mother lioness might even join the fray, which would basically be the end of the galaxy as they know it. Kim Sung-bom looks at her glowing like a supernova and realizes that his sister hasn't changed a bit, always using her fists to talk. So instead of dying, he just throws his hands in the air and surrenders on the spot. Kim Sung-bom isn't an idiot. He sees the 8-foot fighting ghost glowing like a tactical nuke and decides that a peaceful resolution is the only way he leaves this sector in one piece. He keeps his hands up, trying to act like he's doing everyone a favor by not fighting, especially for a job he's already calling crappy. He tries to negotiate from a distance, asking if Elena's targets overlap with his own, basically offering to yield the floor if it means he doesn't have to face her blade. Behind him, the massive Greenwood fleet looks like toys compared to the tension radiating off Elena, who just stares him down with zero interest in his excuses. Elena shuts down the conversation with a cold command to get lost, leaving Kim Sung-bom genuinely rattled as she walks away. He's left wondering what could possibly be on that tiny, mid-tier bounty hunter ship that would make an S-rank legend like his sister interfere in a government-backed erasure mission. While the pirates are sweating, the crew inside the ship is literally pressed against the glass, watching the drama unfold like a horror movie. Elena isn't just threatening the pirates. She fixes her gaze on the bridge and drops a chilling ultimatum: hand over whatever they're hiding, or everyone dies right there in the vacuum of space. Seryung is losing her mind, staring out the window and trying to process why a top-tier monster is suddenly shaking them down. Robert is already in full-blown panic mode, convinced that they're about to be robbed of every credit and piece of gear they own. They're both standing there with their hands up, practically vibrating with anxiety as they try to find a reason for this. Seryung is certain they don't have anything valuable enough to attract someone like Elena, even questioning if she accidentally stashed some secret treasure without telling the rest of the crew. Machin is the only one keeping it cool, resting a hand on the glass and observing Elena with a calm, analytical stare. While Seryung and Robert are spiraling into a mess of fear and confusion, the ancient master is looking for the deeper meaning behind the sudden appearance of the 8-foot fighting ghost. Seryung turns to Machin with a wild theory, asking if maybe he has some secret history with Elena, like a past fling or a bad breakup that turned her into a stalker. Machin doesn't even blink as he shuts that down, calmly stating that her presence has absolutely nothing to do with him. Machin's gaze shifts to a corner of the bridge as he drops a bombshell. Elena is here because of that child. Seryung looks at him like he's speaking in riddles, her confusion only growing as Machin points towards seemingly empty air. The entire bridge crew whips around to look at the hallway behind them, but there's nothing there but glowing floor panels and shadows. Seryung is ready to snap, wondering if the pressure finally got to the supreme heavenly demon's head. Machin doesn't look away, speaking directly to the empty space and telling the child to show herself since there's no more point in hiding. He's got that grandmaster intuition that sees right through even the most advanced cloaking. Suddenly, the air begins to ripple with a purplish energy, and a circular portal of light glitches into existence right in the middle of the hallway. A silhouette starts phasing into reality, caught between dimensions before fully materializing in front of the crew. A girl in a black cap and a sleek, dark outfit finally steps out of the light, looking small but strangely composed. Seryung and Robert look like they've seen a ghost, their faces twisted in absolute shock that someone has been hitching a ride on their ship this whole time. Seryung is instantly back to her hot-tempered self, screaming and demanding to know what's going on and who this girl thinks she is. The girl, Yang Hua-rin, just stands there with a blank expression, looking at the chaos she's caused with wide, silent eyes. Machin explains the situation with his usual detached vibe, revealing that he'd felt her presence following them ever since they left the Wild Crane Inn. He'd sensed a presence without a form and just let her be, assuming it was some incredibly advanced stealth technique that had developed in the 2 millennia he was asleep. Sunja chimes in from the tech terminal, correcting the boss with some cold, hard data. It's not a martial arts technique. The girl is wearing a high-end quantum stealth ring as a choker, a piece of tech so expensive it's basically a flying fortress in jewelry form. Seryung isn't impressed by the price tag. She gets right in the girl's face, shouting about why she snuck onto their ship and what her deal is. The girl quietly introduces herself as Yang Hua-rin, but the captain is way too heated to care about names right now. Hua Rin's gaze drifts toward the window, looking at the massive fleet and the terrifying woman waiting outside. Seryong follows her eyes and finally puts the pieces together, asking the girl if all of those ships and the S-rank bounty hunter are actually hunting her. Hua Rin doesn't deny it, admitting that as long as she stays alive, those hunters will never stop chasing her. Robert, who's been staring at her this whole time with a look of growing realization, suddenly points a finger and screams out her name in total disbelief. Seryong is still catching up, but Robert is already in full-on fanboy shock. He recognizes her immediately. She's not just a stowaway or a target. She's Yang Hua Rin, the main vocalist of the mega-famous idol group Pronosian, and she just brought an intergalactic war to their doorstep. Seryong is standing there looking completely lost while Robert goes into full fanboy mode, practically doing a dance as he tries to explain the situation. He breaks down that Hua Rin isn't just some stowaway. She's the main vocalist of Pronosian, the galaxy's top rookie idol duo. He even calls Seryong out, reminding her that she knows the hit song Dynamite Doo-Doo and actually dances to it every single time he plays it. To prove he's not just making things up, Robert shoves his phone right in Seryong's face. The screen is filled with a fan wiki profile of the idol, showing that she's actually from the same place as him, Mount Hua. He starts rattling off her stats like her height, weight, and even her blood type and MBTI, proving he's a dedicated member of her fanbase who knows she's even prettier in person. While Robert is geeking out, the real world comes crashing in with a final warning from Elena. Her voice booms through the ship, giving the crew a mere 10 minutes to hand over the girl. It's a cold, hard ultimatum with zero room for negotiation. Either they hand her over, or everyone on that ship is going to die right then and there. Back on the bridge, the silence is heavy as the crew looks at the tiny idol caught in the middle of this mess. Robert, still clutching his phone, looks at Hua Rin with genuine worry and asks her what could possibly be the reason for all this. He can't wrap his head around why a massive military force and an S-class bounty hunter would be hunting a pop star. Seryong doesn't let him finish, her expression turning into a mask of cold professionalism. She closes her eyes and declares that the reason doesn't matter anymore. As the captain of S-Devil, she has to make the hard calls to ensure her team lives to see tomorrow, and keeping this girl is a one-way ticket to the afterlife. She stares Hua Rin down, making it crystal clear that the girl is an uninvited guest with no connection to their crew. Seryong isn't being cruel just for the sake of it, but she knows they aren't equipped for this level of heat. She tells the idol straight up that she needs to leave the ship immediately. Robert is absolutely floored, calling out to his captain in a desperate attempt to stop her, but Seryong stands firm. She doesn't even turn to look at him, her back turned as she asserts her authority. She has made her decision as the captain, and she isn't going to let sentimentality get them all killed. Hua Rin stands alone in the center of the bay, looking remarkably composed, despite being told she's being kicked out into a war zone. Behind the safety of the observation glass, Robert is still trying to protest, reminding Seryong that this is the main vocalist of Pronosian they are talking about, but his pleas are falling on deaf ears. Seryong breaks it down for him with brutal honesty, explaining that they can't protect her even if they wanted to. They are already drowning in trouble with Greenwood, and there is zero chance they can stand up to a monster like 8-foot fighting demon Elena. If they try to hold their ground, the girl is still going to get caught, but the crew will definitely end up dead alongside her. With a grimace of internal pain, Seryong slams her fist onto the emergency release button. The mechanical thud echoes through the hallway as the red alarm lights begin to spin, signaling that the airlock sequence has been initiated. The heavy blast doors slide open, revealing the terrifying, sparkling vacuum of deep space. Hua Rin stands at the edge of the abyss, looking out at the stars with a stoic expression, appearing ready to face whatever fate the universe has in store for her. Just as she's about to step out, a hand reaches out and firmly grips her shoulder. She turns in surprise to find Mochin standing right behind her. He's looking as calm as if he's just waiting for a bus, completely unfazed by the fact that the door to certain death is wide open in front of them. He looks down at her and tells her not to worry, maintaining that cool, detached vibe that only an ancient grandmaster can pull off. Hua Rin can only stare up at him in pure shock, her wide eyes reflecting the confusion of why this man is volunteering to follow her into the void. On the other side of the glass, Seryong and Robert are having a total heart attack. Robert is screaming, wondering when the hell Mokchin even sneaked into the airlock, while Seryong is frantically clawing at the wall. She's gone from cold captain to panicked mess, screaming for someone to close the gate before the resident powerhouse gets himself killed. Robert starts to calm down for a second, wondering if maybe they should just watch and see what happens since Mochin is incredibly strong and might actually stand a chance against Elena. Seryong, however, isn't having any of it, screaming at the top of her lungs that they are in the middle of space and physics don't care how strong your martial arts are. She barks an order at Sunja to close the gate immediately, But the robot technical specialist just looks back with a flat, analytical stare. She informs Seryong that it's already too late. The cycle has completed and the gate is fully open to the vacuum. Seryong watches in horror as her most powerful asset drifts toward the exit. The bridge is bathed in the red glow of the emergency lights as the realization hits that she's about to watch her secret weapon float away into the endless dark. Outside the hull, the two figures are actually floating in the silent vacuum, looking like tiny dots against the massive ship. Seryong watches through the window, calling Mochin an absolute insane nutcase for actually going through with such a suicidal stunt. Even in the middle of space, Hua Ren finds the breath to speak, looking at Mochin with genuine concern. She thanks him for the help, but warns him that the martial artists waiting for them are on a completely different level of power and that he needs to be extremely careful if he plans on fighting them. That's when the reality of gravity, or the lack of it finally, settles in for the supreme heavenly demon. Mochin's face contorts into a hilarious bug-eyed expression of pure panic as he realizes he's actually floating in the void with no air and no ground beneath his feet. It turns out that 2,000 years of martial arts training didn't include a lesson on how to handle the vacuum of space. Yang Hua Rin is absolutely losing it because Mochin just hopped out into the void of space without a single piece of tech to protect him. She's staring at him like he's got a terminal case of stupidity, while our supreme heavenly demon is currently doing his best impression of a fish out of water, hacking and flailing around as the vacuum starts to do its thing. She can't wrap her head around the sheer insanity of the situation as she watches him kick and struggle in the absolute silence of the stars. It's a total mess out there, and he looks less like a legendary grandmaster and more like a guy who accidentally stepped off a curb into a bottomless, airless pit. From the deck of the opposing battleship, the West Heaven Sword Matron's daughter, Elena, just watches this absolute circus unfolding in the distance. She's standing there with that long blonde hair flowing, probably wondering if the massive threat she was tracking is actually just some random lunatic trying to drown in a vacuum. Kim Sunbomb stands tall as a silent shadow behind her while the ship's systems start screaming about the literal 300-degree temperatures outside. The pressure out there is high enough to turn human internal organs into a strawberry smoothie in 10 seconds flat. And the comms are exploding with Robert's frantic panic about how going out without a shield is basically a very complicated way to commit suicide. Mochin is reaching peak comedy horror right now, with his eyes bulging out of his skull like they're trying to escape the pressure before the rest of him. His face is puffed out like a terrified blowfish, and he's reaching for the ship like a dramatic lead in a low-budget sci-fi flick, who realized way too late that space is, in fact, very empty and very cold. Things get dark real fast when you see his bloodshot eyes starting to glaze over with actual frost. The guy is turning a very unhealthy, frozen shade of blue as ice crystals form on his skin, and for a hot second, it looks like the legendary heavenly demon is about to become a permanent space popsicle, drifting through the galaxy. Just when he's about to punch his ticket to the afterlife, Seryong dives into the frame, grabbing his head with both hands. She's out there in the void looking like a total boss, refusing to let her biggest asset drift away into the abyss because of some ancient pride. She slaps a nanoshield onto his face, the red hexagonal grid flickering to life just in time to keep his soul from leaking out into the vacuum. She's screaming at him to wake up and breathe, basically trying to bully him back to life through sheer force of will while they both float in the middle of nowhere. Miraculously, his eyes snap back into focus, looking totally normal despite the fact he was a human ice cube just a second ago. Seryong is still gripping his cheeks like a worried mom, her relief probably mixed with a massive urge to punch him for being such a legendary headache. Once the immediate threat of exploding is gone, Seryong is back to her usual hot-tempered self, calling him a bastard for giving her a heart attack. Mochin, being the arrogant master he is, just stands upright in the vacuum like he's on a casual stroll, claiming he's a supreme being and that nothing in this world is actually capable of threatening his life. The vibe shifts to pure awkwardness as the supreme being looks down at the massive metal structure beneath them and realizes he has no idea how to actually get down. Back on the ship, Robert is wiping sweat off his brow, thinking Seryong got there just in the nick of time to save their skins. Leave it to Sunja to ruin the heroic moment with some cold, hard data, pointing out that Seryong was actually incredibly late. She shows the timer 6 minutes and 13 seconds in a vacuum, which should be physically impossible, yet all of Mochin's organs are working perfectly fine, proving he's built different. Elena and her masked muscle, Kim Sungbom, watch from their arena deck as the trio finally makes their way toward them across the surface. The realization is setting in for everyone involved that Mokjin has far surpassed any human limits, surviving the kind of environment that should have turned him into dust. The standoff finally begins on the vast glowing deck of the arena ship, with Seryun feeling the heavy, suffocating aura coming off Elena. She knows this blonde woman isn't just for show. She's a certified fighting maniac, and the air around her feels like it's vibrating with pure, unadulterated bloodlust. Seryun is locked in, staring down the competition while keeping a sharp eye on the masked giant, Kim Sungbom. Having a high-ranking member of Greenwood standing there makes the situation 10 times more dangerous than she anticipated, and the tension is high enough to snap a steel cable. Seryun tries to keep her secret weapon in check, telling Mojin to stay back and not cause any trouble so she can handle the talking. She immediately flips the switch to her fake, bubbly idol persona, waving and acting like they're all just old friends meeting up for a friendly chat rather than a duel to the death. Elena doesn't buy the act for a single second, giving her a cold, piercing look that could freeze a star. But Seryun leans into it anyway. She introduces herself with a huge smile as the Blazing Devil and the captain of the S-Devils, trying to use her reputation to distract them from the fact they're totally outmatched. Kim Sungbom remains a silent, masked wall of meat, but the real action is happening behind Seryung's back. Mojin quietly reaches out and takes Hwarin's hand, a small gesture of protection that carries a ton of weight given the monsters they're currently facing. They stand together under the infinite sprawl of the galaxy, the famous idol and the ancient demon looking like a weirdly perfect pair of outcasts. Hwarin is still reeling from the insanity of the last 10 minutes, looking at Mokjin like he's the only solid thing in a universe that's gone completely off the rails. Mokjin notices her shaking and tells her there's no reason to be nervous as long as he's standing right there with her. But Hwarin knows better. She's looking at Elena and seeing a creature that isn't even human anymore. She's a fighting ghost that exists only for the thrill of the kill. Elena is a total beast. Ever since she was a kid, she's been cruising through the stars looking for anyone strong enough to catch her hands, and spoiler alert, nobody survives the meeting. She even went and built a whole-ass spaceship that's basically just a floating gladiatorial arena just to find more smoke. Even Mokjin, the supreme heavenly demon himself, is actually impressed. He looks at her and sees a warrior who's poured every ounce of her soul into martial training, recognizing that kind of rare, monstrous talent when he sees it. Hwarin, on the other hand, is just trying to process the insanity happening in front of her. Seryun tries to play the peacemaker card, reminding everyone they're all from the Central Plains and should probably just talk this out like adults. But Elena doesn't do talking, she only communicates through the edge of her weapon, and she's already launching her move. Elena lets loose a massive energy blast that tears across the arena floor, turning the whole place into a blinding blue light show. It's the kind of power that would vaporize most hunters on the spot, but Seryun manages to scramble out of the way just in time. Elena isn't playing around. She's moving like a blur of lethal grace, her aura flaring up as she prepares to finish whatever she started. She's the definition of a combat specialist, and her focus is absolutely terrifying as she stares down her targets. The shockwave from the impact is insane, kicking up dust and energy everywhere. Seryun barely manages to land on her feet, keeping her guard up while the arena shakes under the weight of Elena's sheer pressure. Seryun is totally losing her cool, screaming about how they were supposed to be having a civil conversation. She can't believe Elena just went for the kill shot without even saying hello first, proving the captain's hot temper is starting to flare up. Kim Sungbom watches from the side, looking unimpressed through his glasses. He admits that Seryun dodging that wasn't too bad, even if Elena was only using a fraction of her real power. But he thinks dodging might have actually been the worst choice. The Blazing Devil is ready to snap, but the vibe in the air is heavy with warning. Elena is like a mad scorpion. The more you poke and provoke her, the more lethal and poisonous she gets, and everyone involved is just signing up for a way more painful exit. Suddenly, the tense silence is broken by a loud hiccup that comes out of nowhere. Kim Sungbom looks over, completely caught off guard by such a weirdly domestic sound in the middle of a literal death match. Turns out, poor Hwarin is so terrified she's literally got the hiccups. Mojin is just standing there casually patting her back like they're at a park, telling her she shouldn't be getting scared over what he calls childish pranks. Kim Sungbom's jaw is basically on the floor. He's staring at Mojin, wondering how on earth this guy is completely unscathed when he was standing right in the path of a strike that should have sliced him in half. while Elena keeps her spear ready and the energy around her crackles. Mochin is still focused on the important stuff, helping Hua-Ren regulate her breathing. He's being a total martial arts mentor while a literal fighting ghost is trying to end them. Elena's patience is gone, and her power levels are spiking into a purple-hot rage. Mochin just looks back with a totally unbothered expression, completely ignoring the cosmic-level threat standing in front of him. Seryung is panicking, yelling at Mochin to stay out of it because she knows exactly how dangerous Elena is. Elena has already locked eyes with her next target, her gaze glowing with a murderous intent that would freeze anyone's blood. Mochin steps up, putting himself between the danger and the girls. He tells him if they have something to say to the kid, they need to talk to him first, because she's officially under his protection. Meanwhile, the S-Devil scanners are working overtime trying to figure out who this guy even is. The scan comes back with a big fat unidentified result. No data and 0 internal energy drive detected. Kim Sung-Bulmame just scoffs, figuring Mochin is some nameless natural from the outskirts who doesn't realize he's totally out of his league. Mochin gives them one simple piece of advice. If they don't have real business, they should just leave. He dismisses them with a wave of his hand, and for a split second, the whole arena is bathed in a blinding golden light. The flash is so intense it blinds everyone on the deck, from Seryung to Sungbom. It's a massive discharge of energy that feels like a lightning bolt just struck the center of the ship, leaving the entire crew dazed and confused. When the light clears, you see the most insane flex ever. Elena has launched a massive glowing strike, but Mochin hasn't even broken a sweat. He's caught the damn blade with his bare fingers, acting like it's nothing more than a noisy firecracker. Mochin just casually catches Elena's massive spear strike with his bare hand like it's nothing. Lightning is crackling everywhere from the impact, but the guy doesn't even flinch while the fighting ghost is putting her whole weight and momentum into the kill shot. Kim Sung-Bom's jaw is basically on the floor as he watches this play out. He can't wrap his head around how some random dude is deflecting an S-class bounty hunter's peak strike with just a palm, especially since his scanners aren't picking up a single drop of internal energy coming from Mokujin. Elena isn't letting up though, flipping through complex martial styles like a pro. She's mixing the radiant sword technique of the Dayansang sect with Shaolin's great Brahma divine art, pushing her energy output into the red while Mokujin just watches her with a calm, almost bored look on his face. Mokujin is actually analyzing her mid-fight, noticing she's packing internal energy that surpasses 3 full cycles and suddenly swapping over to Wudong's legendary Red Sun divine art. The sheer power she's channeling is turning the entire arena into a purple-tinted storm of raw, vibrating pressure. Even her own brother, Kim Sung-Bom, is losing his mind over the display, wondering if his sister was always this much of a monster. Meanwhile, Mokujin is just standing in the middle of all that blinding light and chaos, looking like he's just waiting for the weather to clear up. Mokujin finally decides to stop just playing defense and asks if she's actually planning on going all out now. He clenches his fist tight, and this eerie, intense blue glow starts gathering around his knuckles, showing he's finally ready to actually do something besides stand there. As the energy explodes between them, Elena's high-tech gear starts screaming at her. A massive warning signal flashes right across her HUD, sensing a threat level that shouldn't even exist according to her combat computer. In that split second of panic, Elena's mind flashes back to her mother, the West Heaven Sword Matron. It's a heavy, oppressive memory of the woman who raised her to be nothing but a weapon. Back when everything felt a lot simpler and much colder, she remembers kneeling before the matron, getting a cold blessing to head out into the world. Her mother wasn't worried about her losing because, in her eyes, Elena was already at the top of the food chain compared to the rest of the universe. The matron's voice echoes in her head, reminding her that death is strictly forbidden because almost no one in the world is even capable of scratching her. She was told that throughout the entire world, there were less than 10 martial artists who could actually cause her harm. It was a rare moment of motherly advice, with the matron resting a hand on her head and setting one final, absolute rule for her daughter's survival. That rule was tied to a special glowing ring the matron slipped under her finger. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a life-saving alarm system designed to detect the impossible. If that ring ever made a sound, it meant Elena had run into an opponent completely beyond her reach, and she was ordered to turn tail and run no matter what. Back in the present, Elena is sweating bullets as that exact warning starts blaring in her ears. She stares at Mokujin, his reflection sitting right in the center of her eye, looking completely unbothered by her presence. The warning in her head is screaming that if she ignores this and stays to fight, she's definitely going to die. The memories keep hitting her like a hammer, the voice of her mother telling her to run away with her tail between her legs. It's a brutal reality check for a warrior who spent her whole life thinking she was the one doing the hunting. She remembers the sea of siblings she grew up with, all born from the matron's womb, but from different fathers, all told to stick together because they shared the same cold blood. The most chilling part of the memory is her mother couldn't even bother to remember her name. Elena snaps back to reality, her hair flying wildly in the energy storm as she tries to process that the monster her mother warned her about is the plain-looking guy standing right in front of her. Elena decides to ignore her survival instinct and redlines her suit, pushing the internal energy drive past 100% and all the way to a staggering 120. A massive, vertical pillar of light erupts, shaking the entire ship as she goes completely overboard with her power. Seryong and Kim Sung-bom can only watch in pure silent horror as the arena turns into a blinding light show. Elena is just a silhouette in the distance, betting everything she has on one final desperate burst of energy. Her armor fully integrates with her martial arts, glowing with bright neon circuits as she drops into a low, predatory stance with her spear. She looks less like a human now and more like a glowing white ghost ready to tear through reality just to stay alive. Mokjin is basically a martial arts historian at this point, checking out these new age moves and thinking they're pretty wild. He realizes that while he was napping for 2 millennia, the world didn't just sit around, they actually evolved their techniques into something he's never seen before, layering transformations on top of spiritual awakenings. Elena isn't playing around. She comes at him like a guided missile, but our guy just stands there like he's waiting for a bus. He's looking at her flashy entrance and decides her output is a bit much for a simple greeting, yet he doesn't even move to defend himself. She starts cycling through styles like she's got a cheat code, mixing the MA Sex Chaotic Storm with the Kunlun Sex Twin Wheels. It's a visual mess of energy and high-tech blades, but Mokjin just leans back with a chill vibe, letting the energy whistle past his nose without breaking a sweat. The power meter hits 125% as she layers on spear and blade techniques from the Diansung sect. Mokjin is just vibing in the eye of the storm, making all that high-tier martial arts look like a toddler swinging a stick while he effortlessly glides through the gaps in her offense. Now she's redlining at 140%, pulling out the beggar sect's greatest hits and finishing it off with the legendary 4,000 red needles. Mokjin is literally upside down in midair, looking into her eyes with the bored expression that says he's seen better moves at a middle school talent show. Elena hits 170% and finally loses her cool, screaming that she's had enough of his games. The sheer force of her charge sends a massive explosion through the arena, but Mokjin just leaps above the wreckage like gravity is more of a suggestion than a law. He lands softly as the smoke clears, looking up into the void with that same blank, unimpressed stare. It's honestly disrespectful how little he cares about a top-tier bounty hunter trying to erase him from existence with a mountain of energy. Kim Sung-bom is down there having a total meltdown because his scanners can't process a human moving like that. Seryong and Hwa-rin are just trying to keep their feet as the entire ship threatens to come apart at the seams from the sheer pressure of the battle. Elena decides to go full final boss mode, growing extra energy arms until she looks like some kind of cosmic war goddess. She's hovering in the air with more glowing blades than a kitchen warehouse, while Mokjin just watches from the floor like he's waiting for her to finally get to the point. She comes down like a falling star, aiming every single one of those glowing blades at his head in a desperate attempt to end it. The pressure is enough to flatten most martial artists, but Mokjin doesn't even move an inch from his spot on the floor. We get a close-up of the mechanical nightmare she's become. But Mokjin just looks up and tells her she needs to stop this nonsense. He calls her a child, and honestly, coming from a 2,000-year-old monster, he's probably being literal. He admits her talent is legit, but warns her that she's officially stepped over the line of righteousness into territory she can't handle. As she closes the distance, he's already seen the end of the fight before she even swings. He can see right through her shiny armor. Her awakening is just a mask for a lot of deep-seated pain and desperation. He realizes she's being eaten alive by her own internal conflict and labels it as a classic case of inner demons before charging up a concentrated blue light in his palm. Mokjin drops the casual act for a second to give her a final warning. If she keeps pushing this, he'll have no choice but to kill her to stop the rampage. He reminds everyone he's got a promise to keep regarding Hwa-rin's safety, and as he prepares the heart sword technique, Seryong and Kim Sung-bom look like they've seen a ghost. A massive, vertical pillar of light erupts from the arena floor, signaling a life-or-death duel that completely ignores the ship's structural limits. It's a literal tower of divine power that makes everything else in the sector look small. Kim Sung-bom can only watch as the light blinds him, his mouth hanging open in pure terror at the scale of the power. Mokjin roars at her to stop one last time, unleashing a blue wave of energy that's 10 times more intense than anything Elena has thrown so far. Seryong and Hwa-rin are shielding their eyes from the insane glare. while Robert watches through the ship's windows like he's seeing a second son being born in the middle of his living room. The entire deck is bathed in this golden white light that's erasing the very air around them. The internal pressure becomes too much for the vessel to handle, and massive cracks start spiderwebbing across the entire hull. Then, the whole thing just gives way, erupting in a massive explosion of light and heat that sends debris flying into the cold vacuum of space. From the outside, it looks like a supernova just went off in the middle of a junk field. Somewhere else, a gritty-looking commander with a mustache and a skull-adorned hat is watching his monitors go haywire, looking like he's just realized he's in way over his head. The old commander starts coughing as he stares out his massive viewport at the fireball in the distance. He's watching his expensive project go up in smoke, and you can tell by the look on his face that he knows the martial world just got a whole lot more complicated. Kim Sung-bom barely makes it out of the carnage, looking like he crawled through a blender before catching the last flight out. He's slumped over in the middle of a teleportation circle, blood dripping from his face as the reality of his situation finally starts to sink in. He manages to limp away with a little help, his voice trembling as he realizes he was a fraction of a second away from being turned into space dust. If that teleportation signal had hit just a hair later, there wouldn't have been enough of him left to fill a matchbox. Behind them, the ship doesn't just sink, it absolutely deletes itself from existence in a massive fireball that lights up the void. The sheer scale of the destruction has everyone screaming about how insane this whole thing is, especially since they all nearly died in the crossfire. Seryung is absolutely losing her mind, standing on a floating rock and grilling Mo-jin about his total lack of self-control. She can't wrap her head around why someone would literally torch their own ride just because they got a little heated. But Mo-jin just stares into the distance with blood on his chin, admitting that holding back wasn't even on the table. Seeing him actually looking worse for wear makes Seryung freeze up, her anger turning into genuine concern as she asks if he's actually injured. Mo-jin doesn't sugarcoat it, acknowledging that the power he just collided with was on a completely different level than he expected. While they're trying to catch their breath, Elena is drifting through the vacuum like a fallen star, her high-tech armor shattered into a million pieces. She's completely exposed and unconscious, floating amidst the golden debris of her own ambition. Seryung looks at the motionless girl and wonders if she's finally kicked the bucket after that last exchange. Mokshin keeps his eyes locked on her, sensing a flickering spark and confirming that she isn't quite dead yet. It turns out someone even more terrifying was watching the whole time, as a massive presence wraps around the broken girl to shield her from the cold. A hooded figure in gold robes appears out of nowhere, cradling Elena with an aura that makes the entire sector feel heavy. Beneath that hood, the cold, calculating eyes of a true monster scan the area while a blinding beam of light from a massive battleship begins to reel them in. This isn't just a rescue, it's an arrival that changes the entire temperature of the battlefield. Seryung's jaw hits the floor the moment she recognizes the legendary figure, while Kim Sung-bom can only gasp out the word from mother in pure terror. The realization that they're standing in the presence of the West Heaven Sword Matron herself makes their previous struggle look like a playground scrap. Mo-jin just stands there on his piece of rubble, looking up at the gargantuan vessel as it looms over them like a descending god. Meanwhile, in the belly of that beast, someone is already being prepared for whatever comes next. Inside the ship's sterile green-lit lab, Elena is tucked away in a liquid stasis tank, looking more like a fragile specimen than a ghost-level warrior. The matron stands before the glass, her silent gaze enough to make anyone in the room want to vanish. The tension is thick enough to choke on as the matron stares down Makin, Seryung, and Hwa Rin, while Kim Sun-bom hits the deck in a full-blown kowtow. He's practically begging for his life, asking to be punished for failing in his duties and lacking any sense of loyalty. Seryung and Hwa Rin are clutching each other's hands for dear life, watching the pathetic display of Kim Sung-bom pleading for his mother's mercy. He's ready to take whatever hit is coming just for the crime of being in the same room as her. The matron doesn't even give him the satisfaction of her anger, coldly telling him he's too insignificant to even intervene. She treats him like a piece of furniture, ordering him to just stand there and pretend he doesn't exist while she deals with the real power in the room. Kim Sun-bom is absolutely floored when he sees his mother, a woman who usually breeds pure arrogance, actually showing signs of respect. She brings her hands together in a formal martial arts greeting, identifying herself to Mo-jin as the ruler of the West Heaven. Seryung can't believe her eyes as the matron admits she broke the rules by jumping into the duel. The legendary woman goes so far as to offer up her own arm as a peace offering for the disrespect, which is a level of apology that should be physically impossible for someone of her rank. Mo-jin, being his usual unbothered self, just points at the girl in the tank and asks if that's her kid. Seryong is internally screaming, leaning in to whisper that he needs to watch his mouth before he gets them all executed by the most dangerous woman in the galaxy. The matron doesn't take offense, calmly confirming the relationship while Motion shrugs the whole thing off. To him, the fact that she was protecting her family is a perfectly valid reason to toss the dueling code out the window. Seryong is still panicking in Motion's ear, desperately trying to explain that he's talking to one of the 5 immortals. She warns him that the matron's temper is legendary, and if he keeps acting this casual, she's liable to slice him into ribbons just by looking at him the wrong way. Mochen and Seryong find themselves standing in the presence of the West Heaven Sword Matron, a woman whose mere existence makes the air feel heavy. Outside the massive viewports, a fleet of sharp, predatory-looking escort ships surrounds a giant, luxury-class battleship as it cuts through the silent void of space. It is a display of absolute power that matches the matron's legendary reputation. The matron stares out into the cosmos, her voice calm but carries an edge as she explains that her daughter Elena hasn't regained consciousness yet. Despite the girl being out cold, the matron has already pieced together that Elena's last mission took her straight to Manhwa, and she's convinced that's where the commission originated. Motion leans against the railing, looking bored out of his mind while staring at the infinite stars, but the matron isn't letting him off that easily. She zeroes in on him, identifying his fighting style as the legendary Demon Heart Asura sword technique, a forbidden art lost for millennia. Her eyes narrow as she demands to know if this kid has a blood connection to the heavenly demon sect. Machen doesn't blink, admitting that while there was once a deep, unbreakable bond, time has a way of rusting even the strongest iron. He treats the history of the sect like a fading memory, while Seryong and Hua Rin stay huddled together on the deck, trying to avoid the suffocating tension between these two monsters. Inside the ship's corridors, Kim Songbom is sweating bullets, peeking through a window with a look of pure dread. The matron is silently analyzing Mochen, noting that his chi and internal energy are so perfectly refined it's actually terrifying. There isn't a single trace of artificiality in his power. It's the kind of peak-level mastery that should only exist in history books. She studies his side profile, fascinated by the fact that he looks like he's barely in his early 20s despite possessing the skills of an ancient grandmaster. It's a state of perfection that defies the current era's logic, leaving her wondering just what kind of monster she's actually dealing with. The matron starts to suspect he's achieved some form of rejuvenation, returning to his physical prime through sheer martial excellence. Before the conversation can end, she decides to drop a bombshell framed as a request. But anyone with a brain knows you don't say no to one of the 5 immortals. She drops the politeness and asks for a serious, all-out fight right there on the ship. Mochen just sighs, noticing that despite her calm face, every word coming out of her mouth is dripping with a murderous intent so sharp it could cut through the hull of the battleship. As the massive vessel glides through the stars, Mochen gives her a reality check, explaining that if they actually go at it, one of them is going to die and the survivor will be permanently crippled. He's not interested in breaking himself just for a sparring match, especially since he's still got a lot of the world left to see. The matron's patience snaps, and she erupts with a massive pillar of purple energy that shoots straight up from the ship's deck into the vacuum of space. Seryong is down below shouting in pure panic because the sudden surge of power feels like the entire planet is about to explode. Her eye glows with a cold divine light as she prepares to erase him, but Machen just keeps looking out at the stars, totally unbothered. He asks her if there's even a compelling reason for them to be trying to kill each other right now, or if she's just showing off. He suggests they save the life or death drama for the future if a real reason pops up, reiterating that he's in no rush to die before seeing the sights. The matron actually pauses, her wild purple hair settling back down as she reined in that terrifying aura. The massive fleet continues its march through the galaxy, a silent parade of steel and fire against the backdrop of a distant nebula. The immediate threat of the ship being blown apart from the inside seems to have passed for now. A red transport ship maneuvers within the formation, firing docking beams to maintain its position. The matron is fixated on the intel about a silencing kill ordered by the Heavenly Demon Sect, trying to wrap her head around why they'd want one of their own masters dead, and why they'd use an outside group like Greenwood to do it. Back inside, Kim Sunbom is groveling on the floor, his face pressed to the tiles in a display of absolute submission. The matron stands by the window, admitting she can't understand the logic behind the Heavenly Demon Sect's actions, as the whole situation reeks of a conspiracy she can't quite see through. Kim Sungbom pipes up, mentioning the recent reports that the elite Red Wolf platoon was completely annihilated by an unknown entity. He's terrified that whatever killed them is the same force they're tracking now, and the connection between the sect and the target is making his head spin. The matron tells him to quit overthinking it before his brain melts. Pacing through the grand observation room, She knows that in the martial universe, your imagination is usually too weak to deduce the real truth behind the shadows. She towers over him, giving him a direct order to thoroughly track their movements and report back without fail. Kim Sung-bom regains a tiny bit of pride, reminding her that Greenwood is the best in the business when it comes to hunting targets across the stars. She stares into his soul with glowing blue eyes, making sure he understands that failure isn't an option. Kim Sung-bom stays glued to the floor, his heart racing as he realizes he's now the lead hound in a very dangerous game. The matron decides to trust him for once, but she gives him a final, stern warning to track them without interfering. In a rare moment of maternal concern, she admits she doesn't want her child to get hurt in the crossfire of the absolute monsters roaming the galaxy. The matron doesn't stick around for small talk, casually heading out and leaving Kim Sung-bom staring at her back like his entire world just got flipped upside down. Sung-bom is absolutely paralyzed with shock. But Mokjin is just standing there with a blank expression, looking like he's trying to remember if he left the stove on 2,000 years ago. The peace is short-lived because Seryung has officially lost it. Steam practically coming out of her ears as she screams at the top of her lungs, demanding to know how they ended up in the crosshairs of legends like Greenwood, Elena, and the matron. Out in the deep, silent void of space, Yonghua Rin looks like she's carrying the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders, drowning in a sea of guilt and confusion. Back on the ship, the crew settles in around a massive table piled high with enough food to feed an army, while Hua Ren drops the depressing bombshell that her own people back on Mount Hua turned into a murderous mob the second she came home. Mokjin is busy vacuuming up sausages like a professional, competitive eater, completely tuning out the drama, while Seryung and Sunja try to process the logic of an entire hometown going from fans to assassins overnight. Hua Ren is deep in her feelings, looking down at the table, but the atmosphere gets shattered when Seryung slams her hand down so hard the plates rattle, her mind fixated on that one specific name. The second the words Mount Hua Planet leave her mouth, Robert goes into a full-blown panic, lunging across the table and grabbing Hua Ren as he demands an immediate explanation, while Sunja just watches the chaotic humans with her usual robotic judgment. Meanwhile, in a dark, high-tech facility, the green glow of life support tanks illuminates the shadows of a very messy and very dangerous project. The matron stands in the middle of the lab, her eyes fixed on Elena, who is still coughing and struggling to recover from the absolute beating she took during their encounter. Elena's face is pressed against the glass, barely hanging on, as the scene shifts over to the neon-soaked exterior of the Wild Crane Inn, a hub where ancient secrets are the hottest currency. Deep inside, the screens are playing back footage of the fight, showing Mokjin moving like a localized natural disaster, turning a high-level duel into a total slaughter. Mokjin's movements on the screen are a blur of pure, terrifying power that defies modern martial logic, and the broker Wang the 18th is watching it all with a look that says he just hit the jackpot. Seryung is playing the negotiation game perfectly, leaning back with her arms crossed as she asks Wang what a complete set of 2,000-year-old S-rank original manuscripts would actually be worth. Wang's eyes practically turn into credit symbols as he realizes he's looking at a literal fortune. Just as we get an ominous view of the Heavenly Demon Sect's District 32 floating in the void, the recording of the battle keeps looping, showing the insane energy signatures and the speed that shouldn't be possible for anyone living in this era. District 32 Commander Jong Ritak is staring at the monitor with a look of pure, unadulterated horror, his brain clearly failing to compute the level of violence on the screen. He looks at the screen and then back at the matron, asking if this martial art looks familiar, but the matron just stands there with a calm, knowing expression. The matron admits that this level of prowess is something that hasn't been seen or heard of in thousands of years, her side profile looking sharp and regal as she humbles the commander. John Ritak's eye twitches as he realizes he's staring at a ghost of the past, and the matron realizes that despite his rank, the guy really doesn't have a clue about the monster that's just been unleashed on the galaxy. The West Heaven's sword matron isn't pulling any punches, demanding to know why the Heavenly Demon Sect is suddenly playing games with Greenwood to chase down a monster like Mokjin. Jong Ritak tries to grow a spine, telling the ruler of the West Heaven Cosmic Ozone that this is strictly sect business and she needs to stay in her lane. Bad move. She doesn't even wait for him to finish his sentence before her blade flashes out. Before he can even blink, there's a fresh, bloody gash opening up right across his throat. Clutching his neck as the blood starts to spill, Ritak asks if she's actually declaring war on the entire Heavenly Demon Sect. She just looks back with a chillingly beautiful smile, asking if she looks like the type of woman who's ever been afraid of a little bloodshed. This is the lady rumored to have devoured her own children, just to sharpen her martial arts. She doesn't care about politics, profit, or loss. She only cares about the hunt. Her purple aura explodes, drenching the entire library in a terrifying light as she levels her blade, giving him the ultimate ultimatum: answer her or die where he stands. Recap realizes he's completely outmatched, knowing even if every single one of his 1,000+ martial artists in District 32 attacked at once, they'd still be fodder to her. He ignites his own fire energy, ready to talk because he knows he's cooked. She drops the absolute bombshell that the Demon Heart Sura sword technique was what cut down her daughter, and Recap's eyes nearly pop out of his head. As their energies clash, the room feels like it's going to melt. But she stays perfectly calm, schooling him on the fact that this legendary art is second in his own sect's hierarchy. Recap tries to deny it, stammering that the technique has been a lost legend for thousands of years, and no one in the modern sect even knows how to breathe that way. But she just mocks his lack of knowledge. She circles back to the million-dollar question: why were they pursuing Molchin in the first place? A hologram of the supreme heavenly demon flickers in the background as the tension reaches a breaking point. Recap finally cracks and lets out the real plot twist. It turns out Molchin wasn't actually the person they were primarily worried about. The real target of the hunt was that girl, Yanghua Rin. Meanwhile, far across the galaxy in the Talavatra system, things are about to get very messy. The S-Devil Cruise, specialized red transport ship, breaks orbit and begins its descent toward the Manhwa planet. They pull up over Hwaham County, a place that looks like it steps straight out of an ancient scroll, except for the high-tech scanners currently picking it apart. Seryun stares at the monitors in total disbelief because the entire county is a complete ghost town, totally devoid of any movement. The crew gathers in the cockpit, confused as hell. Robert tries to hope it's just a holiday, but seeing every shop door wide open with no one inside is a massive red flag. Sunja, the crew's robotic brain, runs the numbers and the results are grim. There are over 10,000 inhabitants registered here, but her scanners show zero signs of life. This sends Robert into a total tailspin since this is his hometown. He starts panicking, grabbing Seryong and begging to go down immediately, completely losing his cool as the weight of the situation hits him. While Robert is having a full-blown breakdown, Hua Rin stands there silently crying, her eyes fixed on the empty streets of the home she barely recognizes anymore. Majin isn't one for long-winded mysteries, so he shoots a look at Hua Rin and tells her to spill whatever she knows about this ghost town. They're standing in the middle of a literal planetary blackout, and the silence is starting to get way too loud. Before Hua Rin can even process the pressure, Sunja's robotic voice cuts through the tension. She's locked onto a life signal, her holographic displays flickering with data that points straight to the heart of Manhwa's headquarters, specifically the Jaha Pavilion. Robert practically jumps out of his skin when he hears that name, knowing full well the Jaha Pavilion is where the big boss of the Manhwa sect usually camps out. Seryun stands there with her arms crossed, watching the tech play out, while Robert starts looking like he's ready to bolt or fight. Sunja drops the real bombshell. There's a massive life signal pulsing from the pavilion, but it's the only one left on the entire planet. Hua Rin stays silent, her hat shadowing her face as they look up at the massive, lantern-lit fortress shrouded in an eerie, thick mist that feels like a trap waiting to spring. The crew finally reaches the massive bridge leading to the main gate, and the scale of the place is absolutely ridiculous. Seryong and Mojin lead the way, while Hua Rin follows close behind, all of them staring up at the dark, silent halls that should be teeming with disciples. Suddenly, Robert decides it's time for a fashion show, appearing in a massive, clunky combat suit that looks like it belongs in a museum. Seryong is genuinely baffled, asking what he's even doing and why he's dragging that scrap metal out now. Robert is on a total patriot trip, screaming that he won't forgive anyone for messing with his homeland while his special forces suit hums with power. Seryong can't help but roast him, asking if that thing even works or if he just spends his weekends oiling it in a warehouse. But Robert insists he's been keeping it combat ready every single day. Seryong decides to ignore the dramatics for a second and asks Sunya for a status check on that signal. The entrance to the pavilion looks like a dark maw, and the tension is high enough to snap a sword. Sunja's warning isn't exactly a confidence booster, as she mentions the signal is getting stronger and might not even be human. Robert, fueled by pure adrenaline and probably a bit of fear, starts taunting the tunnel, screaming for whatever monster is inside to come out and face the special forces. Just as Seryong tells everyone to stay sharp and move in, a literal ball of sun-bright light begins to form deep inside the dark tunnel. Seryong watches it with a narrowed gaze, sensing that things are about to go from 0 to 100 real quick. Before anyone can even blink, Seryong's pupils dilate as she realizes they've walked into a literal furnace. A massive, roaring pillar of fire erupts from the gateway, moving with enough force to incinerate anything in its path. The explosion is absolutely cataclysmic, a giant beam of orange flame blasting through the center of the courtyard and turning the bridge into a total death zone. It's not just a trap, it's a statement of absolute power meant to erase them from existence. We see the pure terror and shock reflected in Sering and Hua-Rin's eyes as the heat becomes unbearable. The entire world turns a blinding orange, and for a split second, it looks like the S-Devil crew just hit their final destination. But Malkin doesn't do dying today, and he moves faster than the flames, grabbing both Seryong and Hua-Rin in a protective huddle. He's crouched on the steps, acting as a human shield while the fire rages around them, looking completely unbothered by the hellscape. Seryong is gasping for air, looking up at Mokjin in total disbelief at how he just pulled them out of the fire. She's completely shaken, staring at him as the embers dance around his silhouette, trying to understand what kind of monster could throw an attack like that. Mokjin just stands up like he's finishing a casual walk in the park and tells them it's time to move. Seryong is still on the ground, processing the fact that they almost got turned into charcoal, while Mokjin stares into the smoke with that blank, terrifyingly calm expression. They look over to see Robert's perfectly maintained suit slumped over, arms crossed in a defensive shell while smoke pours off the metal plates. Seryong's heart sinks for a second, wondering if her loudmouthed teammate just got cooked inside his own armor. Seryong rushes over to the scorched mech, shouting for Robert to say something if he's still breathing. She checks her comms with Sunja, her voice laced with genuine worry that the Special Forces soldier didn't make the cut. Sunja's analysis is as cold and robotic as ever, confirming that Robert is physically fine because the suit actually did its job. The reason for the silence? He's just paralyzed with pure, unadulterated terror, probably crying in the fetal position behind those high-tech sensors. Seryong lets out a long sigh, relieved but also totally done with the drama as she looks back at Mokjin. He's standing alone in the haze, a solitary figure watching the shadows as the real fight for Mount Hua finally begins. Just when things couldn't get any weirder, a jagged bolt of neon purple lightning tears through the atmosphere, homing in on Lee Mojin like a guided missile while he stands his ground, looking more curious than concerned. The strike doesn't end in an explosion. Instead, the energy condenses into a singular glowing plum blossom petal that grazes Machin's forehead, shattering into a million shimmering embers that dance around his face. Suddenly, the entire hall is swallowed by a whirlwind of these purple petals, and through the haze, Mokjin spots a lone figure sitting on a throne at the far end, completely wreathed in an intense pulsating violet fire. This is the source of the pressure. A man radiating a presence so massive it feels like the air itself is vibrating, and even the supreme heavenly demon looks on with a stoic, analytical gaze. Seryong is trying to keep her cool, looking at the figure and asking if this is the life form signal they were tracking, while Sunja's voice crackles over the comms to confirm the data. The revelation hits like a physical blow. That man on the throne is none other than the legendary leader of Mount Hua, the flourishing blossom sword sovereign Yang Joksan, and Seryong's eyes widen as the sheer scale of the situation sinks in. Mokjin catches one of the blossoms in his palm, observing that it opened from pure heat, a clear sign that the man before them has reached the absolute peak of the plum blossom heavenly fragrance heart technique. But there is something fundamentally wrong. The blossoms are blooming in a deep, unnatural purple, signifying that the legendary art has been twisted and mixed with the forbidden purple mist divine art. Seeing her father in such a state, Yang Ha-rin breaks down completely, tears streaming as she whispers for her dad, but the man on the throne remains a silent, burning statue. Seryong senses the danger and demands to know what the problem is, prompting Mokjin to explain the volatile chemistry of extreme yang fire and extreme yin water clashing inside a single body. He warns her that when a martial artist pushes past their natural limits like this, a demon takes root in their heart, turning them into something that is no longer human, and he orders the crew to run immediately. Mokjin admits that even with his own power, he can't guarantee their safety if the sovereign's energy loses its precarious balance, while Hua-Rin is nearly swept away by the sheer force of the pressure. Seryong screams for everyone to stop, but it's too late to maintain order. Hua-Rin is already sprinting through the storm of petals toward the throne in a desperate suicidal dash. Mokjin's eyes flash with a piercing blue light as the energy in the room reaches its breaking point, and he realizes that the window for a peaceful resolution has officially slammed shut. High above, Sunja is watching the countdown clock on her monitors, and as it hits the final seconds, she begins to scream about the critical danger level rising within the pavilion. The timer hits the final tick, and right as the world seems ready to vaporize, Hua-Rin throws herself into the violet flames, reaching out for the father she thought was lost forever. In a move that defies all logic and survival instinct, she wraps her arms around the burning sovereign while Seryong watches in total shock as Mokjin stands shrouded in his own protective aura. The violent purple energy suddenly vanishes, replaced by a warm golden radiance that fills the hall with a peaceful glow, settling the chaotic atmosphere in an instant. The fire dies down to reveal young Joksan as a normal man again, gently cradling his daughter in his arms as the inner demons finally seem to have quieted, leaving Seryong absolutely baffled by what she's seeing. Mokjin watches the reunion with a knowing look, calmly stating that the world has finally returned to its natural state, even while Sunja remains confused by the sudden drop in the disaster signals. A digital timer flicks over to 18 hours on the dot, signaling a massive shift in the reality of the planet as the atmosphere begins to hum. Suddenly, the ghost town isn't so ghostly anymore. A glitchy, digital overlay reveals a thriving marketplace bathed in the warm glow of sunset and thousands of lanterns. The streets that were dead empty seconds ago are now packed with people living their lives, making it look like the entire population just respawned out of thin air. Amidst the sudden chaos, Young Joksan appears with an eerie calmness that has Seryong looking like she's seen a ghost, while Mokjin just takes it all in with his usual unbothered stare. The S-Devil crew finds themselves plopped right in the middle of a busy outdoor eatery, surrounded by locals who weren't there a moment ago. Seryong is losing her mind, questioning if Sunja's tech is a total piece of junk because the scanner said 0 life signs, but Sunja just keeps sipping her drink, completely chill. Sunja zooms in with her high-tech robotic eye, and the HUD reveals a terrifying truth. Every single person in that crowd has an internal energy drive sitting at exactly 0%. She points out that even the kids are completely drained of energy, but Seryong tries to play it cool, figuring as long as they aren't rotting corpses, it's not her problem. Robert decides his stomach is more important than the mystery and waves his hand to flag down a server for some pork, living his life as simply as possible. A waitress walks right toward them with a tray, and Robert gets his order ready, thinking he's about to get a 5-star meal. Instead of stopping, the girl walks straight past them like they're made of glass, leaving Robert hanging and looking like a total clown in front of the crew. He's genuinely offended, wondering if he's developed a superpower of invisibility, but he tries one more time as she loops back around. He practically does a dance to get her attention, but she glides past him again, her eyes fixed on something or someone else entirely. Sunja drops the bombshell that it's not about noise. They literally don't exist in the eyes of these people, serving as nothing more than background scenery. Seeing 2 guys eat dinner right in front of her like she's a ghost gives Seryong the major creeps, and she immediately wants to bail before things get even more out of hand. Nearby, the sound of tea pouring breaks the tension, as a steady hand fills a cup with perfect precision and grace. It's Young Joksan drinking his tea in total isolation, despite the guests right in front of him, while Hua Rin watches from a distance, whispering for her father. She's devastated, admitting he's been stuck in this hollow state since she returned from her tour, unable to even recognize her presence. The two of them watch the sovereign from behind as Hua Rin explains that he's basically a wind-up doll, repeating his chores, meals, and garden work with robotic timing every single day. Mokjin starts waving his hands and messing with the tea set just to see if he can get a reaction, but Hua Rin warns him that preventing the sovereign from his routine could be a recipe for disaster. Hua Rin is practically hyperventilating, shouting that Mokjin has no idea what kind of disaster he just triggered by messing with the tea ceremony. The sovereign doesn't even hesitate, launching a strike so fast, it's basically just a red streak of death aiming to take Mokjin's head off. They collide in a massive burst of light, the force of their martial arts clashing so hard it looks like the atmosphere is literally tearing itself apart. It's a high-speed execution of moves that would make a master dizzy, the sovereign swinging his sword in a blur while Mokjin weaves through the lethality with terrifying precision. The sovereign starts glowing with a violet intensity, his eyes burning red as he prepares a strike that feels like a literal natural disaster in human form. Mokjin moves in to intercept, their palms meeting in a blinding flash that creates a massive crater of energy and forces everyone back. Through the smoke and chaos, Hua Rin is still screaming for them to just stop before the entire mountain gets erased from the map. The sovereign stands like a pillar of purple lightning, and Mokjin is genuinely impressed, noting how the man is somehow surviving while channeling extreme yin and yang energy at the same time. Hua Rin desperately explains that the teacup is the anchor, and if it isn't put back right now, the sovereign will never stop his rampage. Mokjin reflects on how this whole situation defies logic, since a normal human body should have burst like a balloon under the weight of that much raw power. The surrounding energy starts blooming into a massive, shimmering plum blossom made of pure, destructive, violet intent. Hua-Rin's face is pure terror as she begs him to hurry up because they're officially out of time and luck. The pressure becomes unbearable as the plum blossom pulses, ready to explode and take the entire district with it. Amidst the world-ending light, Mojin finally prepares to move, clutching the small teacup that's caused all this trouble. He winds up with a look of total calm, treating the legendary sovereign's rage like a simple game of catch. He hurls the cup, and it streaks through the air like a bullet, piercing through the layers of the plum blossom aura. The cup spins through the storm of petals, heading straight for its designated spot on the table with supernatural accuracy. Everything hangs in the balance as Hua-Rin watches the porcelain piece fly, her eyes wide with the realization that this is their only shot. As soon as the cup lands, the violet lightning and the massive flower just evaporate, leaving the sovereign standing in total silence. The switch flips back to his peaceful, hollow state, and the sovereign goes right back to pouring tea as if he hadn't just almost ended the world. Mokshin looks on with that trademark calm. But next to him, Hua-Rin is looking like she just saw a ghost. Under the glow of 2 moons hanging in the night sky, she stares out over her home, realizing that since she got back from her interstellar tour 2 weeks ago, the vibe has been completely off. Seryung and the crew are standing right in the middle of a festival that looks normal on the surface, but there's an eerie stillness behind the bright lanterns and crowded streets. It's like the entire population is made of wind-up dolls, stuck in a loop and doing the exact same motions at the exact same time without a hint of soul. Robert, being the curious soldier he is, decides to test the waters and reaches out to get someone's attention. He taps a guy on the shoulder who's just standing there glued to his phone, trying to get a straight answer about what the heck is happening in this city. Robert's shades reflect the neon lights as he waits for a response. But the man he tapped just stares back with empty, vacant eyes that don't even seem to register a human is in front of him. Suddenly, the guy just freezes mid-action, and Robert's face drops because he realizes he just broke the loop. It's not just one guy, though. The entire crowded marketplace comes to a dead halt as white, glitchy particles start eating away at the man with the phone. Robert is left hanging as the guy literally dissolves into thin air right in front of him, and he's left wondering if his eyes are playing tricks on him. He panics, asking if everyone just pulled a mass teleportation stunt, while Sunja stares into the void with a look that says her scanners are losing their minds. Seryung turns on her, shocked that their resident tech genius is actually stumped. But Sunja explains that while the energy signatures look like teleportation, the sheer magnitude of it makes 0 sense. Before Seryung can even process what a scale that big means, she looks around and realizes the bustling street has turned into a total ghost town in the blink of an eye. The city is still glowing with beautiful lanterns, but the silence is deafening as Sunja drops the bombshell that every single life sign on the entire planet has just vanished. Seryung is reeling from the news, but Hua-Rin stands there looking like she expected this, mentioning that when the people vanish, that's when the real nightmare begins. She looks down at the empty streets with a heavy heart while the S-Devil crew braces themselves, sensing a new kind of presence moving through the mist. Through the haze and the glow of the lanterns, a synchronized thudding of footsteps echoes as a massive army of featureless, glowing figures starts marching into the city. Robert and Seryung are practically frozen as these metallic, mannequin-like things approach, their blank faces reflecting the orange light of the festival. Thousands of these things flood the streets, moving with a terrifying mechanical precision that makes Robert realize they are in way over their heads. Seryung's eyes go wide as she tries to figure out if they're staring down an army of high-tech androids. But Sunja, with her systems finally locking onto the signal, corrects her, noting their skeletal, half-finished look and identifying them as simple construction droids, which is somehow even creepier. Sunja pulls up the specs on her holographic HUD, trying to keep everyone calm by explaining that these metallic creeps are just early model droids. They were built for basic planetary development and manual labor, meaning their AI is about as smart as a toaster, and their cognitive abilities are basically non-existent. Hearing that, Robert lets out a huge sigh of relief, figuring he freaked out over a bunch of fancy construction tools for nothing. He reminds the squad about the 3 laws of robotics, convinced these droids are physically incapable of hurting a human, but Seryung isn't buying it because every single one of them is packing a massive sword. Sunja shrugs it off, guessing the blades are just being used as makeshift tools, but Seryung has 0 patience for the mechanical crowd. She steps up and starts barking orders like the captain she is, telling the droids to clear out and find another path because they're scaring the locals, but the machines don't seem to be listening to her hospitality. Out of nowhere, one of those harmless robots decides to test Robert's theory by swinging its massive blade right at Seryung's head. She's got the reflexes of a pro and backflips out of the way just as the sword slams into the wooden floor, sending splinters flying everywhere in a shower of sparks. Seryong sticks the landing and immediately starts screaming at the machine, asking if it's having a total system meltdown. But as she looks up, her eyes reflect a much bigger problem. The entire army of droids is closing in on them, and they don't look like they're here to fix the plumbing. Before they can even plan their next move, the ground erupts in a massive blast, and the droids launch themselves into the air with terrifying mechanical precision. They're swarming from every angle, raining down like a localized apocalypse of scrap metal and sharpened steel. From a high balcony overlooking the district, Hua Rin watches the massive explosions light up the night sky like a sick fireworks show. She knows the drill by now. As soon as the living people vanish into thin air, these metallic nightmares crawl out of the shadows to take over the streets. Down in the chaos, the S-Devil crew is fighting for their lives as the droids go full Terminator mode, attacking every single living thing in their line of sight. It's a total bloodbath of sparks and kinetic energy as Seryong and the team realize these things have completely bypassed their safety protocols. The droids are literally crawling up the walls of the buildings like giant mechanical insects, swarming the rooftops in terrifying numbers. Hua Rin remembers her own tour ending in a similar disaster. Recalling how she was ambushed the second she stepped back into the city, she stares out at the ruins with a heavy heart, knowing deep down that the only reason she's even breathing right now is because of her father. She looks back toward the darkness of the inner chambers, noting that for some bizarre reason, the machines are too terrified to even step foot in this specific area. Deep inside the palace, a heavy, oppressive purple mist begins to swirl around the throne, signaling a power that's on a completely different level. A pale hand reaches out and grips the ornate dragon carving of the seat, crackling with an energy that feels like it's holding the entire world together. There sits Yong Joksan, the Sword Sovereign himself, looking like a god of war drenched in violet flames as he maintains his eerie, silent vigil. Hua Rin watches him with a mix of awe and sadness, explaining that no matter how many people disappear or how many robots invade, her dad is the one constant that remains. The energy radiating off him is absolutely insane, a pillar of purple light that pierces through the gloom of the palace as cherry blossom petals dance in the wake of his power. But even in this state of inner demons, he's like a mountain that refuses to move, an anchor for a world that's falling apart at the seams. Li Mochin stands there watching the sovereign with a rare look of genuine respect on his face, realizing that the man isn't just sitting there, he's barely hanging on by a thread. He sees the struggle behind those closed eyes, acknowledging the sheer willpower it takes to stay in the game. Mokjin explains that Jokshan is literally burning through his entire internal energy reservoir and his very soul just to keep his sanity intact against his inner demons. It's a suicidal level of focus, and Mokjin realizes it's all because the man has something so precious he has to protect it no matter the cost. As the cherry blossoms swirl around them in the glowing violet light, Mokjin can't help but find the whole display pretty admirable for a wind-up doll. He looks over at Hua Rin, seeing the desperation in her eyes, and decides that he's seen enough of this tragic little routine. He turns his back on the throne and tells Hua Rin that he's taking over the situation, walking toward the exit with a cool, dangerous confidence. He's done playing games and wants to get a real good look at the face of the absolute scum responsible for turning this place into a robotic graveyard. Back in the town square, the situation has gone from bad to we're doomed as Seryong, Robert, and Sunja find themselves completely surrounded. The droids have formed a perfect circle around them, their mechanical bodies blocking off every possible escape route while the lanterns above flicker ominously. A close-up of the lead droid shows a single, glowing red eye pulsing with a murderous intent that definitely wasn't in the factory settings. Seryong is losing her mind, screaming at Sunja to explain why these supposedly safe labor droids are currently trying to turn them into human shish kebabs. Sunja looks equally stumped, her analytical mind struggling to process how the intelligent systems of these androids could possibly violate the fundamental laws of robotics. Robert is just standing there in shock, realizing that his safety laws are about as useful as a paper shield against the army of steel closing in. Seryong finds herself staring down an endless sea of white, featureless mannequins with glowing red eyes that pulse with a single-minded hunger for violence. These things aren't just malfunctioning. They are moving with a predatory instinct that completely ignores the fact that she's a living, breathing human being. Robert is having a complete meltdown as he realizes these aren't just construction tools gone rogue. His military instincts kick in, recognizing the tactical formation of these combat-ready androids, and he starts to suspect that someone has stripped away every safety protocol ever written to turn these machines into pure killing tools. The horde surges forward like a crashing wave, and Seryung doesn't even flinch as she plants her feet in the center of the courtyard. She barks at Sunja to hold on for dear life and hide, knowing that the next few seconds are going to be a blur of flying metal and shattered circuits. Suddenly, the dark night is ripped apart by blinding pillars of orange light that incinerate everything they touch. Droid limbs and torsos are sent spiraling into the air as massive blasts of pure kinetic energy turn the courtyard into a scrap metal graveyard in a matter of heartbeats. The sheer force of the explosions leaves Seryung and Sunja completely wide-eyed and shell-shocked. As the smoke clears, they look up to see a massive, hulking shadow towering over them, steam hissing from its heavy metallic joints. It turns out Robert wasn't just panicking, he was prepping his heavy-duty combat rig, and he looks like a walking tank with massive shoulder cannons that are still glowing red-hot. He drops the bombshell that these things aren't just simple droids, they are iron gangshi, high-tech puppets modeled after the ancient reanimated corpses of legend. The scale of the ambush is finally visible as the camera pans out, showing a literal carpet of destroyed machines littering the streets of the district. But the victory feels short-lived because a fresh, disciplined line of these metallic zombies is already marching through the lanterns to finish the job. Far away from the chaos, Rachel Arkamon sits in a cold, blue-lit command center watching the S-Devil crew through a holographic surveillance feed. His subordinates dismiss the bounty hunters as a minor nuisance, arrogantly claiming they could wipe the whole group off the map in less than 10 seconds. Rachiel's icy gaze lingers on the screen the moment he hears Robert's full military title mentioned. The fact that a former first sergeant from the Northern Galaxy's elite special tactical division is involved actually makes the mad scientist pause, realizing this isn't just some random group of scavengers. A massive holographic file of Robert in his full military glory pops up, showing the kind of high-tier weaponry he used to command. Rachel's right-hand man asks if they should pull the trigger on a total elimination order, but the Count just sits in his leopard print throne, silently calculating the risk. Meanwhile, back on the ground, Lee Mochin is just standing casually among the smoldering wreckage of a dozen droids like he's out for a midnight stroll. He looks totally bored by the whole situation, casually asking what the big deal is while staring at the piles of scrap metal he probably could have dismantled with his eyes closed. Robert is riding a massive ego high, laughing through his shades and bragging about how he kept his gear perfectly oiled for a moment just like this. He's feeling like a total hero, gloating about how his preparations saved their skins while the others just stare at him. He starts the loud, clanking process of disengaging the heavy armor plates, his suit whining as it retracts back into its compact form. He's patting himself on the back, glad he didn't listen to the haters who told him to sell his gear for spare parts when they were flat broke. Seryung just gives him the most unimpressed look possible, reminding him that the only reason they almost sold his precious equipment was because they literally didn't have enough money to buy food. Her deadpan expression is a perfect reality check for Robert's sudden burst of bravado. Moshin picks up a severed mechanical arm and dangles it like a piece of weird trash, his 2,000-year-old brain trying to process what he's looking at. He asks why anyone would bother wearing such heavy, clumsy metal junk, completely failing to understand the concept of power armor. Sunja, being the analytical robot she is, gives him a blank stare and corrects him with zero emotion. She explains that it's not armor at all, but a droid, a fully functional robot designed to operate independently. The term robot goes right over Machin's head, leaving him looking more confused than a toddler at a calculus exam. He tells her to stop using nonsense words and explain it in a way that someone from the ancient martial world can actually wrap their head around. Seryung is too tired for a history lesson and just plops down on a stone ledge, leaving the explanation to the expert. Sunja keeps it simple. A robot is basically just a machine that's been built to think and act exactly like a human being. This realization hits Machin like a freight train, and his eyes widen in genuine shock. He stares at the metal arm in his hand, unable to comprehend how a cold chunk of iron could ever mimic the complexity of a human soul. No matter how much the world has changed since his era, Sunja decides that words aren't enough, and gives him a live demonstration by casually peeling at her own skin to reveal the mechanical systems underneath. Machin's soul practically leaves his body as he screams in total horror, finally realizing that the girl he's been traveling with is one of the very machines he was just mocking. After the absolute chaos of the droid attack, the street is a literal graveyard of scrap metal, with Sunja trying to explain the concept of technology to a very confused Mochin, while Seryung is completely passed out in the background from the sheer exhaustion of it all. Sunja realizes they haven't exactly kept Mochin in the loop about the modern world, mostly because they were too busy trying not to get turned into Swiss cheese by the mechanical horde. Mochin isn't just standing around though. He scoops up Hua Rin and realizes they are being watched by something small and mechanical hidden in the debris. He stares right into the glowing red lens of a surviving droid head, sensing the predatory intent behind the glass even as the machine lies shattered on the floor. Back in a high-tech command center, the scanners are losing their minds because Mokjin's biological data isn't showing up in any known database. The system flags him as a pure natural, meaning he has a terrifyingly high internal energy drive without a single piece of cybernetic mounting, which is basically impossible in this age. Count Ritual watches the feed from his shadows, his masked face unreadable as he dismisses Mokjin as just some foolish kid whose actions don't make any sense. He thinks the guy is just a lucky wanderer, but his attention quickly shifts to the other man in the group because he recognizes a much more professional threat. The holographic display flickers to a high-res shot of Robert, and Ritual's tone shifts instantly when he realizes they're dealing with an elite soldier from the Special Tactical Division. This isn't just some bounty hunter. Robert is a former first sergeant from the Galaxy Combat Unit, a man trained for high-stakes planetary warfare. Ritual knows that a man with Robert's pedigree doesn't just show up at a radioactive tomb by accident or simple coincidence. He narrows his eyes, convinced that Robert is there with a very specific, very dangerous purpose, and he orders his subordinates to stay vigilant and dig deeper into their mission. While the S-Devil crew is being hunted by cameras, the scene shifts to deep space where a massive, moon-sized spherical fortress, the headquarters for District 32 of the Heavenly Demon Sect, is preparing for something big. It's an intimidating piece of hardware, looking like a Death Star designed specifically for martial arts masters. The spherical ship docks in a massive hangar where Zhong Ritak is waiting with his nerves on edge, standing alongside a subordinate as they prepare to welcome a high-ranking official. The scale of the hangar is ridiculous, showing just how much power the Heavenly Demon Sect wields in this corner of the galaxy. The ship's ramp lowers and out steps a pair of feet wearing casual slippers, which is definitely not the footwear you'd expect from a galactic big shot. Dane walks out of the craft looking like he just rolled out of bed, despite being one of the most feared investigators in the disaster safety headquarters. Zhong Ritak bows so low he's practically kissing the floor, thanking the officer for traveling such a massive distance to reach District 32. He's treating this kid-like figure with more respect than a king, knowing exactly what kind of power Dane hides behind that sleepy exterior. Dane just lets out a massive, bored yawn, rubbing his face and complaining about the length of the trip while reminding everyone that this visit better be worth his time. He's got that "I'm too high level for this" energy, acting like a kid who was forced to go on a boring field trip instead of a high-ranking official on a mission. They move into a medical lab, where a man is strapped into a wheelchair, his head bearing a nasty, glowing handprint scar that looks like it's burning from the inside out. Dane walks up and places his own tiny hand on the man's bald head, his fingers perfectly aligning with the ancient wound. Zhong Ritak watches with bated breath, asking if the officer can see anything through his specialized senses. Dane remains silent, closing his eyes as he begins to probe the man's nervous system, looking for the specific martial arts signature that left such a devastating mark. The room is filled with a cold blue light as Dane continues the examination, the medical equipment around them looking primitive compared to the raw internal power he's projecting. He isn't just looking at the wound, he's feeling the residual energy of the master who delivered the strike. The patient whispers that the pain has actually started to fade since Dane touched him, but he's still feeling a persistent, terrifying heat deep inside his skull. Dane notes this with a calm. Indeed, his mind already working through the martial arts logic of a technique that leaves a burning heat long after the impact. Suddenly, Dane's eye begins to crackle with blue energy, his vision piercing through the man's skin and bone to see the flow of chi beneath. He's about to get aggressive with the diagnosis, and the air in the room starts to vibrate with the sheer pressure of his aura. Dane slams his energy into the man's head, causing the guy to let out a blood-curdling scream as his skull practically deforms under the pressure of the technique. It's a brutal way to investigate, but Dane is looking for the echo of the original attack, and he doesn't care how much it hurts the test subject. Steam and white smoke start pouring off the man's head as Dane finally pulls his hand away, the glowing handprint on the patient's scalp pulsating with a violent pink light. Zhong Ritak watches the aftermath, realizing that Dane has successfully stimulated the residual chi left by the attacker. Dane strokes his chin, looking contemplative as he points out a weird discrepancy between two different scars he's found. One of the original marks is swollen and protruding, but the second one is indented, making it seem like they might be from completely different techniques. Zhong Ritak looks absolutely stunned as Dane drops the final bombshell, confirming that despite the visual differences, the energy signature is identical. Both of these devastating wounds were caused by the legendary 9-yin palm, a technique that should have been lost to the ages. Cho Dane is chilling in this massive, dimly lit hall that looks more like a high-tech temple than an office, sitting at a tiny desk while his underlings scurry around. One of the officials walks in carrying a metal delivery box, proving that even if you're a top-tier disaster investigator, you still need your black bean noodle fix delivered right to the door. This little genius starts dropping serious martial arts lore while his meal is being set down, casually mentioning how the 9-yin palm is basically entry-level stuff for his sect. He's looking all composed and mysterious, flexing the fact that he mastered the entire technique by the time he was only 7 years old, which is just a ridiculous level of talent. As he starts mixing those noodles with his chopsticks, he explains the high-level science behind the scar they've been investigating. Usually, this palm technique is all about bone-chilling cold energy, but the master who hit this target was so skilled, they perfectly suppressed the frost and left behind pure heat instead, which is basically the ultimate martial arts flex. We get a quick glimpse of Moljin absolutely cratering an opponent into the floor, and Dane explains that this weird energy reversal was actually an act of mercy. By flipping the nature of the art from ice to fire, the attacker was going out of his way to avoid collateral damage and keep the enemy from being completely shattered by the cold. Zhang Ritak is standing there looking like his brain just short-circuited because turning ice into fire is theoretically impossible for anyone but a god-tier master. Dane doesn't seem to care about the existential crisis he's causing, though, as he just stares at his bowl and suggests they focus on the most important thing, eating those noodles before they get soggy. The high-stakes tension in the room is suddenly broken by the most relatable sound ever as Zhang Ritak's stomach lets out a massive rumbling growl. He tries to keep his dignified commander face on, but his body is clearly betraying him the second he smells that food. Meanwhile, back on the S-Devil ship, the crew is having their own food situation, as Suryoung stares down a literal mountain of grilled sausages like she's about to win an eating contest. The vibe is casual, but you can tell the conversation is about to get way heavier than the actual menu they're staring at. Suryoung starts housing a sausage while Robert brings up the Iron Gangshi, a name that sounds like some old-school myth but is actually a terrifying new reality. They're all gathered around the table trying to make sense of the rumors Robert picked up during his days as a Special Forces soldier. Robert explains that some mad scientists are developing combat androids designed specifically to hunt and kill humans, which totally breaks every law of robotics in the book. While he's laying out this grim news, Mojin is busy being a total menace and pinching Sunja's cheek like she's a stress ball, still not quite getting that she's a robot. The truth behind the Iron Gangshi project is even darker than they thought, as Robert reveals these droids use the actual brains of dead humans to bypass their safety programming. We see a massive red transport ship hovering over a city littered with the mechanical remains of these monsters, showing just how much damage they've already done. Mokjin is still struggling with the concept of a machine person, asking Sunja if she's really not human while still tugging on her face. Sunja, being the unbothered queen she is, just deadpans and offers to pop her own head off or disassemble her limbs right there if it'll help him understand her hardware. Mokjin finally pulls his hand away, looking totally overwhelmed by how bizarre and insane the modern world has become. They all look down at the grill only to realize that, while they were busy talking about human brain robots, the entire mountain of food has mysteriously vanished. The mood drops immediately as they stare at the empty, greasy tray, and Suryoung looks like she's about to have a total meltdown over the missing snacks. Robert is still trying to talk about the insanity of using dead people's brains for weapons, but the lack of sausages is the real tragedy in this room. Suryoung looks over at Mokjin, who is sitting there with a 1,000-yard stare that looks like he's having a midlife crisis. She thinks he's just traumatized by the robot talk, so she tries to be a good captain and tells Sunja to fire up some more hot dogs to cheer the kid up. The silence that follows is absolutely brutal because Sunja just stares back with those cold blue eyes and delivers the ultimate bad news. They are officially all out of food. Suryoung stands up, looking like she's about to punch the ceiling because being hungry and hunted by robots is a terrible combination. Suryoung is busy sighing over their terrible luck, but behind her, Mokjin is starting to vibrate with a terrifying purple aura that's filling the whole room. He looks like a ticking time bomb, and it's definitely not because he's scared of some high-tech zombies. This is pure, unadulterated hanger. Robert and Surround look back at him, totally confused by the weird, aggressive mumbles coming out of his mouth. Mokjin is actually fuming about the complete lack of etiquette in this era, specifically the part where someone has the audacity to steal his food right from under his nose. The supreme heavenly demon finally snaps, his energy exploding outward in a massive wave of pink and purple flames that practically shakes the ship. He's absolutely insulted that even after he announced his legendary identity, people are still treating him like a nobody and, even worse, a nobody without a hot dog. Seryung and Robert have that hilarious "oh right" moment where they remember he actually did scream about being the ultimate demon king earlier. Seryung decides to just ignore the glowing, angry teenager for a second so she can focus on their actual survival priorities one by one. Seryung marches off to handle business, while Robert and Sunja scurry after her to get away from the blast zone. They leave Mojin alone at the table, where he's still sitting there radiating pure petty rage and demonic energy over his empty plate. Mokshin is back on the ship, and man, the vibes are at an all-time low. He's sitting alone in his massive, empty dining hall looking like his dog just died. But honestly, it's worse. He's just starving. He stares down at a metal tray that's basically been licked clean, leaving nothing but a sad smear of grease and a few lonely crumbs. Our legendary supreme heavenly demon is reduced to scavenging. He reaches out with a shaky hand, desperately pinching one tiny orange scrap of food left on the cold metal. It's a tragic sight for a guy who used to rule the world, now just hunting for a single calorie in the dark. He pops the scrap into his mouth with a look of pure exhaustion, probably wondering how his life came to this. Meanwhile, outside on the planet's surface, the scenery is even more depressing. The ground is absolutely littered with the silver, mangled remains of thousands of droids that were just dismantled by his techniques. Sunja places her hand on one of those spherical droid heads, her robotic precision taking in the damage. Seryung is standing nearby, looking like an absolute boss in her red jacket with her arms crossed, her massive flying red truck hovering right behind her over a city street lit by traditional lanterns. The scale of the carnage is insane. The entire street is a graveyard for these tin cans. Robert is down on his haunches, poking at a piece of scrap metal with a tool, totally unimpressed by the tech he's looking at. Robert starts roasting the build quality, complaining that the joints are garbage and the alloy is way too weak for serious combat. Sunja doesn't miss a beat, holding up a detached droid arm and explaining that these things were just prototypes, nowhere near a finished product. Sunja's eyes start glowing with a bright yellow light as her internal scanners go into overdrive. Seryung notices the change in her tech specialist's behavior and asks if she's actually picking up something useful from the junk. Sunja pokes her finger right into the droid's sensory port, noting that the neural networks are incredibly basic. She clicks a mechanism and out pops a glowing golden chip, the MZ-07, which is basically the brain of the whole operation. She lets the empty head fall back to the ground with a dull thud, calling the whole setup an embarrassment to the term artificial intelligence. As she inspects the tiny chip, she explains that it's purely designed to receive external commands, meaning these robots don't have a single drop of autonomous will. Seryung's sharp mind puts the pieces together instantly, realizing that the entire droid army was being remotely controlled from somewhere else. Sunja confirms it, stating that every single unit was being piloted individually. Then Sunja drops the real bombshell. Her scanners detected exactly 9,817 droids in the attack. Seryung realizes the horrifying implication. If these weren't AI, it means there were at least 9,817 humans somewhere else, plugged in and pulling the strings. The scene shifts to a chilling high-tech morgue filled with row after row of glowing blue pods. This is the heart of Rachel Archimonde's operation, where the masked scientist himself stands among his silent creations and a few guardian droids. Rachel's cold eyes stare out from behind his black mask, overseeing a nightmare factory. Inside one of the pods, a human body floats suspended in blue fluid, hooked up to a thick bundle of cables and tubes directly where his brain should be. The man inside looks like he's in a deep forced sleep, his life force being siphoned off to pilot a piece of scrap metal. Back on the surface, Seryung gets a chilling thought and asks Sunja what the total population of the Manhwa district was supposed to be. Sunja's answer is chillingly precise, 9,818. While she says that, a massive pillar of violet energy erupts from a traditional throne, signaling that just one single person is missing from the count. Yang Jaksan sits at the center of that swirling purple light, looking like a wind-up doll stuck in a routine of inner demons. Nearby, his daughter Yang Hua Ren watches the terrifying display, surrounded by falling cherry blossom petals as the energy surges around them. Up in the District 32 headquarters, Zhang Ritak is literally breaking a sweat, looking like he's about to have a heart attack from the news. Meanwhile, the tiny official Dane is casually wiping his mouth after a meal, calmly ordering a total lockdown of the entire district. The massive, moon-sized spherical fortress of District 32 hangs in the void of space, glowing with defensive lights as the order goes out to recall everyone. Zhang Ritak can barely believe it. stammering out a question of why such an extreme measure is even necessary. Chodane stares out a massive window at the swirling galaxies beyond, looking way too old for his tiny body. He explains that they are living in precarious times and that 2,000 years of peace is a long time for a civilization to get soft. He looks down at his empty bowl, where Jong Ritak's reflection shows a man terrified of the future. The little investigator drops a final, cryptic truth. When the tiger that once ruled the mountain loses its fangs, the wolves aren't going to wait, they're coming to take over. Chodane is out here dropping some major animal kingdom metaphors while sitting in his high-tech chair, explaining that wolves only huddle up in packs because they're terrified of the tiger. But once that top-tier predator vanishes, these wolves start looking at each other with eyes that have seen true power, and suddenly their own teammates start looking like easy prey, because they're nothing compared to the king. He's walking with Jong Ritak toward a massive, gleaming, spherical facility, explaining that in a world without a tiger, the strongest wolf is the very first one to get a target painted on its back. As they reach the boarding ramp of the sphere, Jong Ritak is playing the part of the stressed-out subordinate, while Chodane wonders out loud if the mystery man flexing their sex secret moves is the catalyst for all this chaos. Right before he boards, an emergency ping hits his device with news that the unidentified individual is making a move toward Manhwa, and Jong Ritak looks like his soul just left his body from the sheer shock. Chodane doesn't skip a beat, heading into his ship while warning that an unknown element has been dropped onto a powder keg, and if even a single spark flies, the entire world is going to go up in smoke. The spherical ship ignites its engines and blasts off into the starry void, leaving Jong Ritak behind to watch the light trail as the boss man heads off to handle the situation before things get explosive. Back on the Manhwa planet, the city is glowing with traditional lanterns and ancient vibes. But the mood is heavy as Jong Ritak questions why the people who vanished are suddenly popping back up at night. Yonghua Rin is sitting on the floor while violet energy and cherry blossom petals swirl around her, explaining to Seryung and Sanja that everyone returned to normal except her dad, who's stuck in a ghostly loop. There sits Yang Joksan, the flourishing blossom sword sovereign himself, looking completely zen but totally unresponsive while Seryung watches him, probably wondering how much raw power is hidden behind those shut eyes. Seryung stands tall in her red jacket, asking how much time they've got until the sun drops, and Sanja gives her the technical rundown that day and night on this planet swap places every 6 hours like a light switch. Suddenly, the air gets thin, and Seryung whips her head around like she's sensed a predator, while Sunja stares ahead with those analytical robotic eyes, as if her internal sensors are hitting a critical error. Despite the tension, the wind-up doll routine of Yang Joksan continues as he reaches out to gently stroke Hua Ren's head, performing the fatherly gesture without a single shred of actual consciousness. Hua Ren looks up with eyes full of heartbreak as she details his daily loop-sipping tea, reading in the garden, and repeating the same actions he did on her birthday and before her last tour. It's a tragic scene of a man lost in his own memories. But Seryung notices a tactical problem when she realizes the streets outside are still dead silent and nobody has actually shown up yet. Out on the rooftops, Robert is keeping watch over the empty, lantern-lit city, looking stressed because the nightly return of the disappeared citizens is running way behind schedule. Sunja turns her head toward her captain with a look that spells trouble, explaining that it's not that the people aren't appearing, it's that the crew itself is starting to fade out of existence. Seryung looks down at her own body in pure disbelief as she starts glowing with a strange internal light, her physical form becoming transparent like a glitching hologram. Sunja's robotic brain is sounding the alarm in real time, reporting that the captain's vital signs are literally being deleted from the local reality. Within seconds, Seryung completely dissolves into a cloud of glowing embers, leaving Sunja standing alone in the massive hall while the mindless sword sovereign continues his empty routine in the background. While Seryung is busy turning into space dust, a massive battleship with a glowing skull emblem cuts through the void. Inside the command deck, the atmosphere is heavy with the hum of forbidden tech and the urgent report of a fresh incident. Kim Sung-bom stands before a massive viewport, his gaze fixed on the celestial dance of planets while an officer in a heavy green coat delivers the bad news. A high-level teleportation signature was just detected spiking right from the center of the Manhwa planet. Sunbom doesn't even blink, his voice cold as he demands to know exactly where the target was sent. The officer checks his data and confirms the destination is Genta, the desolate second moon orbiting Mount Hua. Genta is nothing but a cold, pockmarked rock floating in the dark, a place where secrets go to stay buried. Down on the surface, things are getting way too real for Seryung as the environment shifts into a disorienting nightmare. in a massive crater hidden from the stars. A scream echoes as Seryung feels her very essence being ripped apart. She watches in absolute horror as her body begins to dissolve into a cloud of glowing particles, leaving her with a terrifying sinking feeling that she's being erased. Panic sets in as she realizes she's becoming transparent, her physical form fading into nothingness like a bad connection. She's convinced this is the end, spiraling into an existential crisis, thinking she's transitioned from a top-tier bounty hunter to a literal ghost. She's practically begging the universe for a do-over, reaching out into the empty air because she's got too much unfinished business to go out like this. But just as quickly as she started to fade, the light stabilizes and her hands regain their solid, familiar weight. Seryung stands there in a daze, checking her pulse and staring at her palms like she just survived a trip through a cosmic blender. She's visible again, but the relief is short-lived as she realizes she's definitely not in a safe place anymore. She finds herself in a dim, cold industrial hall that reeks of secret projects and bad intentions. Sitting on a gaudy leopard print throne at the end of the room is a man who radiates pure, calculated malice, guarded by a silent, skeletal droid. Seryung's combat instincts kick in immediately as she locks eyes with the mysterious figure known as Ritual Archimond. Behind that half-mask, his single blue eye burns with a cold intensity that suggests he's been waiting for her to arrive in his laboratory. The tension in the room is thick enough to cut with a sword, a standoff between a hot-tempered captain and a mad scientist in his lair. Meanwhile, back on the Greenwood battleship, the technical report is taking an even darker turn. The officer explains that this wasn't a standard move. There was zero consent from Seryung's end, making it a forced unilateral teleportation. It's a move so dirty and dangerous that it's strictly forbidden by galactic law, usually reserved for the worst intergalactic criminals. Looking out at the shimmering curve of the planet, the officer realizes the scale of this mess and suggests they need to escalate this to the higher-ups immediately. He's shaking in his boots, clearly realizing they've stumbled onto something way above their pay grade. Kim Sung-bom slowly turns around, his expression unreadable behind his glasses as he asks if the officer actually thinks there's anyone higher than him in the sector. The soldier instantly hits the floor, groveling because he realizes he just insulted the most dangerous authority in the room. Sung-bom tells him to keep his head down and just monitor the situation without making any sudden moves. The fact that someone is using forbidden tech on Genta means there's a major player with deep pockets and high authority pulling the strings from the shadows. He warns his subordinate that jumping in blindly will only bring them more heat than they can handle, so they need to assess the damage before taking action. The officer can only offer a frantic salute, knowing he's walking on thin ice with a leader who doesn't tolerate mistakes. Sunbom adjusts his glasses, the reflection of the moon hiding his true thoughts as the scene shifts to a much more regal, yet equally chilling setting. The West Heaven Sword Matron is breaking her silence, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. Deep within the West Heaven cosmic ozone, Elena is on her knees in a massive ceremonial hall, showing a rare moment of submission to her mother. The matron wants to know exactly who she crossed paths with during her mission to Manhwa. Elena doesn't hold back, admitting that the man she fought didn't just stand his ground. He dropped a bombshell that shook her to her core. He looked her in the eye and clearly claimed to be the one who fathered her. The matron's eyes widen in genuine shock as the weight of that revelation hits her like a physical blow. Elena admits she lost the duel to him, confirming that the man who claimed to be her father possesses power that rivals the legends of old. The matron is piecing it together, realizing the situation on Mount Hua is changing fast, but while she's deep in thought, someone else is losing their absolute mind. Robert is currently in a state of pure panic, slamming the table and screaming that some nobody had the guts to kidnap Surround, and he's not about to sit around while she's in danger. He goes on a profanity-laced tirade so intense that even the technical specialist, Sunja, refuses to translate the censored garbage coming out of his mouth, leaving Mojin totally confused. Putting the shouting aside, the group realizes that the captain's disappearance isn't random. It's likely tied to the mass vanishings on the planet, suggesting they're all being herded to the same spot. Sunja pulls up the data, confirming that Seryung was hit with a forced, unilateral teleportation, a serious crime under galactic law, while Robert gets physical, grabbing Mojin's hoodie and demanding they move now. As Robert shakes him like a rag doll, Sunja explains that this isn't just a temper tantrum. It's a full-blown military PTSD flare-up that turns Robert into an angry, uncontrollable mess when things get heavy. Mokjun just stares at him with those dead, unimpressed eyes, calmly telling the frantic soldier to take his hands off him before things get ugly. Sunja warns that Robert is too far gone to listen to reason, but Mokjun's aura suddenly flares with a command so heavy it practically vibrates the air, forcing Robert to freeze in his tracks. Just like that, the rage evaporates, and Robert is left bowing and apologizing like a kicked puppy, while Sunja notes he's basically an undisputed pro at needing anger management. With the drama settled, Sunja focuses on the mechanics, explaining that because long-range teleportation is a technical impossibility, Seryong has to be somewhere relatively close by. Machin looks out the viewport, wondering where the drop-off point could be as Sunja narrows the search down to the planet itself, or the two moons hanging in the distance. Since the Manhwa planet is empty except for the Sword Sovereign, they're left with Genta and Cicerus, both of which are buzzing with just enough life signs to make it a coin toss. The moons are clustered so tightly that the sensors can't pick a specific target, leaving Mochin to wonder if they're really just going to have to play a guessing game with their captain's life. Sunja takes a long look and decides to bet on the golden moon, Cicerus, figuring that if the captain was going to be dragged anywhere, it would be the one that matches her obsession with wealth. Unfortunately, the robot's logic fails this time, as the scene shifts away from the golden moon to the icy surface of Genta, where Seryong realizes she's in a very bad neighborhood. She finds herself staring down Ritual Archimond, who is lounging on a leopard print seat in the middle of a massive dark facility, looking completely unbothered by her sudden arrival. Rachel doesn't even say a word, instead letting his tech scan Seryong's entire body, flagging her high-capacity internal energy drives that are way more powerful than a typical bounty hunter should have. He analyzes her gear, noting her hidden energy reserves and the electronic soft sword at her hip, seemingly unimpressed by the hardware she's packing under that red jacket. The masked scientist mocks her, calling her a backwater amateur who's carrying around top-tier tech she doesn't even know how to activate, while Seryong's patience hits zero and she demands to know who he thinks he is. While the tension in the hangar reaches a breaking point, somewhere in the dark, a tiny green sprout begins to push through the cold earth, growing silently under a single beam of light. Down in a dimly lit chamber, a single green sprout is getting all the spotlight while a mysterious elder squats down to baby the plant. Cho Dane, the high-ranking official who looks like a literal kid, walks up and keeps things respectful, checking in with his master to deliver some heavy news. Cho is looking pretty humble here, bowing his head because he's got some serious tea to spill. The master doesn't even need the full report. He already knows this is all about that Manhwa planet mess and the impossible task Cho's been trying to handle. It's a total mood in the void as the master starts dropping some deep metaphors, telling Cho to stay calm and wait for the bud to fully bloom. He explains that you can't tell if you're dealing with a willow or a poplar until it shows its true colors, so rushing the play is a rookie move. The master is playing the long game, wanting to wait until the entities pulling the strings are completely exposed before they strike back. Cho is just soaking it in, realizing that the big fish are still hiding in the shadows of the martial world. The master looks him dead in the eye, questioning why he's acting so childish instead of showing the maturity he was raised with. Cho finally folds and admits that during his investigation, a wild card appeared that he never could have predicted. This new guy is apparently a complete beast, using their sect's own secret arts and even reaching the level of reversing his energy flow. We see a glimpse of Lee Mokshin absolutely popping off with the legendary Demon Heart Sura sword technique, looking like a god of war. The master's face says it all, he's genuinely shook to his core. Cho points out the terrifying part. This person has reached the absolute pinnacle of mastery. But the problem is, he's got zero affiliation with their sect. Suddenly, the vibe shifts as that little sprout from earlier is shown wilted and dead on the floor. The master's face is partially obscured as he drops a chilling, two-word command that changes the whole game. Kill him. The master goes full demon mode, his face turning into a nightmare of veins and pure, unadulterated rage. He's screaming that this person is an anomaly and a monster that needs to be hunted down and killed without fail, leaving Cho looking completely stunned. We cut to a much quieter scene where Cho Dane is sitting in a meditative pose on top of a massive, perfectly smooth sphere floating in the deep reaches of space. It's a crazy contrast to the rage we just saw, just pure silence among the stars. The orb is just a speck in the vast galaxy, moving toward its destination. Meanwhile, back on the moon Genta, Seryong is standing her ground in a dark industrial facility, demanding to know who she's talking to as she stares down Ritual Archimond. Ritual is the definition of unbothered, lounging on a massive leopard print throne and sipping tea like he's at a garden party. He doesn't even bother answering, just casually tells his guard to check it. As a translucent iron Gangshi starts to materialize, this skeletal white robot lunges from the ceiling like a glitch in the Matrix, catching Seryong off guard. She's quick to react, charging up a golden energy blast in her palm and shouting at the scientist for his sudden hostility. Seryong lets the energy fly, but this robot is on a different level of speed, slipping through the attack and closing the gap instantly. The whole hangar is getting lit up by the raw power of her blast, but it's hitting nothing but air. The machine is right in her face now, its single red sensor eye glowing with bad intentions. Seryeon is sweating bullets, totally floored by how a hunk of metal can move with that kind of insane velocity. Ritual just sits back and tells her that resistance is a waste of time. He's ready to start the interrogation and offers her a life free of suffering if she just plays nice and answers his questions. Seryeon isn't the type to take orders from a guy in a mask, telling him to shut his mouth while she tries to fight back. Rachel's interest is piqued though, as he notices something he calls adaptive variation in her fighting style. She pulls out a light-based blade and starts spinning like a tornado, whipping up a massive blue cyclone of martial energy to keep the robot at bay. She's pushing her gear to the absolute limit. The whirlwind takes over the entire room, but the iron gangshi is still on her. It's moving so fast it looks like there are multiple copies of it, its silver claws glowing red as it prepares to shred her through the storm. It's a high-octane clash of steel versus raw energy, with Seryeon barely parrying the robot's lethal strikes. She's fighting for her life against a machine that seems to know her every move before she even makes it, turning the hangar into a blur of blue and silver. Rachel Archimond looks absolutely bored out of his mind, confidently claiming his little device has downloaded every single martial art known to man. Meanwhile, Seryeon is finding out the hard way that he's not just blowing smoke, as the iron gangshi she's fighting starts mimicking her movements with terrifying precision. The blazing devil is starting to feel the heat, sweating as she realizes this hunk of junk is reading her like an open book. She isn't about to let a lab rat in a mask get the better of her though, so she screams in frustration and charges up a massive energy blast in her hand to blow this tin can to kingdom come. The iron gangshi is way faster than it looks, turning into a literal blur of afterimages and slipping right past her big energy attack. Before Seryeon can even figure out where it went, the robot is right behind her, delivering a brutal strike that sends her flying across the hangar. Seryeon gets tossed through the air like she's made of cardboard, skidding across the cold floor while the robot just stands there looking menacing. It's clear this thing isn't just a machine, it's a master-level fighter in a chrome body, and it's making the captain of S-Devil look like a total rookie. The robot moves in for the kill, its red sensor eye glowing with a murderous intent that would make most people fold instantly. But Seryeon's got that captain energy for a reason, flipping herself back up with some insane core strength and refusing to give Rachel the satisfaction of seeing her stay down. She whips her blue energy blade around in a defensive arc, creating a glowing cyclone to keep the metallic freak at a distance while she catches her breath. Ritual, being the ultimate hater, just sits there sipping his tea like he's watching a mid-tier movie instead of a high-stakes duel. The iron gangshi tilts its head, probably running a billion simulations a second to find the best way to dismantle her. Seryeon hunkers down, holding her dual-bladed staff in a low guard, waiting for any opening she can exploit against a target that literally doesn't have a soul to pressure. Her face is dripping with sweat as the reality sinks in that her standard bounty hunter tricks aren't going to cut it here. She knows she's in deep trouble if she doesn't change the rhythm, so she prepares for one final, desperate lunge to see if she can overwhelm the machine's processing speed. Seryeon tries to use her own speed to create after images, hoping to confuse the robot's sensors, but the iron gangshi isn't falling for it. It anticipates her exact position and reaches out with those cold metallic fingers, catching her off guard from the back while she's still mid-movement. The machine slams its fist down with enough force to crack the floor, but Seryeon barely manages to leap into the air, spinning like a top. She's trying to stay mobile, but the robot is already looking up, its internal servos whining as it prepares to meet her in the sky. From her perspective, high above, the robot looks small, but that doesn't last long as the iron gangshi rockets upward with a burst of mechanical power. The whole room seems to shake as the machine closes the gap in an instant, turning the fight into an aerial dogfight that Seryeon wasn't prepared for. Pushed to the edge, Seryeon goes for broke, shouting out her bullet technique as she dives straight down like a glowing meteor. She's putting every ounce of her energy into the tip of her blade, aiming to pierce the robot's core and end this nightmare once and for all. The collision is absolutely violent, sending sparks flying everywhere as her energy blade grinds against the robot's reinforced chassis. It's a battle of pure will against cold programming. But even with all that momentum, the iron gangshi doesn't seem to be buckling under her weight. They're locked in midair, a blur of red and silver as the robot manages to get a grip on her chest piece. Seryeon is struggling to break free, her eyes wide with the realization that the machine's physical strength is on a completely different level than any human fighter she's ever faced. She tries to slash at the robot's arm to force a release, but the iron gangshi is too fast, parrying her strike while its other hand begins to glow with a gathered energy of its own. It's a point-blank range situation, and Seryong is stuck right in the center of the blast zone. The robot doesn't hesitate, delivering a devastating palm strike directly into Seryong's solar plexus that sends a shockwave through her entire body. The impact is so heavy, it looks like it's trying to punch a hole straight through her, leaving her gasping for air as her defenses finally shatter. Seryong loses her grip on her weapon, the blue energy blade flickering out as it falls toward the floor. She's completely neutralized, dangling in the air as the robot prepares to finish the job, proving that Ritual's martial arts database is the real deal. The machine holds her up like a trophy, its sensor eye pulsing a deep, ominous red as it prepares for the final blow. Seryong looks totally spent, her energy reserves tapped out and her body failing her against the relentless efficiency of the Iron Gangshi. Just when it looks like lights out for the captain, a cluster of glowing projectiles streaks through the air, shattering like glass upon impact. It's the Dark Heaven Blood Dragon Dagger technique, a move so legendary and unexpected that it completely halts the robot's momentum in its tracks. Ritual finally drops his mask of arrogance, looking stunned as he recognizes the deadly calling card of the Sichuan Tang clan. The Iron Gangshi is suddenly pinned down by a massive, invisible pressure, and the tide of the battle shifts in a heartbeat as the Hidden Masters finally decide to join the party. Seryong is catching her breath on the cold floor, looking up at Ritual Archimon while the scrap metal of his defeated project lies nearby. But the atmosphere in this hangar just shifted from a skirmish to a total deathmatch. She's looking completely cornered, blood dripping from her chin as she stares down the masked scientist, realizing that the usual tricks aren't going to cut it against someone who seems to know her every move. Suddenly, a violent green aura starts erupting from her body, making Ritual actually tilt his head in surprise because he recognizes a martial art from the Sichuan Tang clan that was supposed to be wiped off the map years ago. Seryong is going all in now, overriding her systems and initiating the Xuanru Divine Art Drive at maximum power because when you're facing a monster, you have to become one yourself. Ritual is genuinely shocked that she possesses a secret technique reserved only for clan heads. But Seryong shuts down his commentary with a scream and unleashes a massive pillar of green energy that tears through the ceiling. The sheer pressure of the attack forces Ritual to brace himself as the energy begins to dominate the entire sky of the industrial facility, coming at him from every direction like a literal storm of light. The room is swallowed by a blinding flash of green as the technique peaks, reflecting in Ritual's single visible eye as he realizes this isn't just a simple bounty hunter he's dealing with. He identifies the move as the Infinite Rain Blossom technique, just as the entire area is bombarded by a million lethal needles of chi, turning the facility into a beautiful but deadly display of ancient power. Far away from the explosion, a massive luxury battleship cuts through the silence of space, while back on the ground, the scene shifts to Elena kneeling in the shadows of the very same industrial complex. Elena is replaying the weirdness in her head, remembering how she was supposed to be on a mission at Manhwa before everything went black, and she woke up staring at the man in the mask. The industrial hangar feels like a tomb as Ritual stands over her, his long white hair and black mask making him look more like a ghost than a man as he watches his new guest wake up. The realization hits her hard when she sees the symbols of unilateral teleportation, a forbidden technology that moved her across the galaxy in an instant without her consent. Elena is ready to snap, but Rachel just stands there cool as a cucumber, telling her that she shouldn't be surprised because he's only there to grant her deepest wish. He starts reading her like an open book, bringing up her title as the 8-foot fighting ghost and mocking her for turning spaceships into dueling arenas just to satisfy her hunger for battle. He hits a nerve by calling out her despair and the hopeless night she spent crying because no matter how many people she beat, she never felt like she was actually getting stronger. Elena is absolutely fuming at having her secrets laid bare, but Rachel just offers a simple solution, telling her that the only way to truly understand what he's offering is to try and take him down. They take their positions on the wide arena floor, two powerhouses separated by nothing but empty space and the massive ancient screens that decorate the facility. But the fight ends before it even begins, with Elena finding herself hoisted into the air by a grip that her legendary strength can't even budge. Rachel looks completely unimpressed as he holds her off the ground, his arm glowing with a menacing green energy that makes all her training look like child's play. Both of these top-tier warriors are finding out the hard way that against the mastermind of the Iron Gangshi project, their best efforts are nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Rachel is playing the daddy card in the worst way possible, literally holding Elena by the back of her head like she's a misbehaving pet. He's promising to make her strong, dangling that carrot of power she's been chasing to her own despair. But it's clear this isn't a gift, It's in recruitment for his twisted project. Switching gears, Rachel has Sir Young by the throat now, mocking her weak body while offering her the same devil's bargain. He's got this casual arrogance that's honestly infuriating, treating these high-tier fighters like they're just unfinished prototypes waiting for his special touch. The catch is finally revealed as Rachel explains the price of this new power is abandoning her useless mind, essentially turning her into a meat puppet for his tech. While he lays out the terms, the West Heaven Sword Matron looks absolutely floored, realizing her own daughter is about to lose her humanity to this masked freak. We see the end result of his handiwork as Elena stands tall, but she's not the woman we knew anymore. She's encased in a sleek, biomechanical suit that radiates a chilling blue energy. The matron watches from her seat, probably wondering if the 8-foot fighting ghost she raised is even still in there behind that cold armor. Elena's eye glows with a mechanical precision, confirming the steel fortification is complete and her status as a human is officially revoked. Back on the S-Devil ship, Sunja is glued to her screens, her robotic fingers flying as she picks up some seriously heavy energy signatures that are definitely not normal. Robert is having a full-blown meltdown in the cockpit, shouting for them to floor it before things get even messier. He's a former Special Forces guy, but his panic reflex is top tier right now, especially as Sunja stares at a massive radar blip that's closing in way too fast for comfort. The radar is screaming because a giant red battleship that looks like a spacefaring semi-truck is hauling through the void. It's an absolute unit of a vessel, and it's clearly not interested in sharing the road with a mid-tier bounty hunter crew. This celestial truck ship is bearing down on a massive moon, looking like a total predator in the deep black of space. It's intimidating, well-lit, and possesses a presence that makes the S-Devil ship look like a literal toy. Robert is practically jumping out of his skin, threatening to crush whatever is in their way just so they can escape. But he's clearly overestimating their little boat. The big red ship just keeps coming, radiating a level of authority that Robert's panic can't even begin to process. Sunja drops the reality check, explaining that running is basically impossible because they're looking at a Celestial-class battleship. She pulls up the scan, showing the massive energy output of the vessel and confirming that they are hopelessly outclassed by whoever is driving that monster. Then the real bombshell drops. Sunja identifies the ship as belonging to the Heavenly Demon Sect. Robert's face goes pale, realizing they aren't just dealing with a big ship, but the most feared organization in the martial universe, and he's currently in their blind spot. Inside the Demon Sect's ship, the vibe is surprisingly quiet as the pint-sized powerhouse Cho Dane stands before a seated Lee Mokjin. It's a weird sight, a high-ranking official who looks like a toddler facing off with an ancient grandmaster in a hoodie. Lee Mokjin is keeping it incredibly casual, focusing more on his sausages than the high-stakes political meeting happening around him. Cho Dane observes the supreme heavenly demon, likely trying to gauge if the 2,000-year-old warrior is actually paying attention to the crisis at hand. Robert is still reeling in the background, trying to wrap his head around the fact that this little bald kid is a first-class officer of the Disaster Safety Headquarters. He nervously asks what brings someone of that rank to a place like this, his military background making him respect the title even if the person holding it is tiny. Cho Dane hops onto a chair to get on Makin's level, telling the master to feel free to speak comfortably. It's a power move wrapped in a polite gesture, showing that despite his appearance, the kid is used to dealing with world-ending threats. Robert is still stuck on the high-ranking officer part, staring at Cho Dane like he's seeing a ghost. Meanwhile, the little officer gets straight to the point, telling Mokjin that he's there because of a pressing request that only a man of his legendary skills can handle. Cho Dane reveals the man behind the curtain, Rachel Archimond. He explains that Rachel was once a top scientist for the human government's defense contractors, showing a flashback of the masked man standing among his early mechanical monstrosities. The project was known as the Steel City, a terrifying attempt to mass-produce martial arts machines, but Rachel was too inhumane even for the military's tastes. He got expelled and vanished into the shadows, leaving Robert and the others to listen in stunned silence as the backstory unfolds. It turns out Rachel didn't just retire. He's been hiding and conducting even larger experiments with secret funding. Cho Dane explains that someone inside the human military is likely still backing him, which is a major problem for the stability of the entire martial world. After dropping all that heavy lore, Lee Mokjin just casually asks for some water, showing he's still the most chill guy in the room despite the looming war. Cho Dane's gaze turns sharp, knowing that the alliance between Rachel and rogue government factions is a fuse that's already been lit. Mojin is just hanging out, looking completely unbothered by the heavy political bombs being dropped in the room. Meanwhile, Chodane, the high-ranking official who looks like he's ready for a nap with that neck pillow, is giving off major do not mess with me energy. Even after hearing that the military is pulling the strings, Mojin's poker face is legendary, making you wonder if he's even listening or just thinking about his next meal. Robert is absolutely losing it, sweating through his combat suit because the thought of the human government's military being involved is way too much for his nerves. Chodane doesn't have time for the hysterics, stone-coldly telling the crew that this situation has officially spiraled past anything a group of civilians can handle. While the kid official lays down the law, Mojin is casually pouring himself a drink like he's at a Sunday brunch rather than a secret war briefing. Desperation hits Robert hard as he brings up Saryeon, reminded that their captain is currently in the hands of a madman. He's looking for a lifeline, but Chodane is all out of sympathy, basically telling Robert that there's zero help coming and the best they can do is send a few prayers her way. It's a brutal reality check that leaves the former soldier looking like he's seen a ghost. The disrespect finally pushes Robert over the edge, and he slams his fist onto the table with enough force to rattle the room, shouting that they aren't going anywhere until Saryeon is safe. He doesn't care about Cho's rank or his warnings. He's ready to go through anyone to get his captain back. Across the table, Mojin takes a calm sip of his drink, watching the explosion of emotion with the detached curiosity of someone who's lived 1,000 lifetimes. Mojin finally speaks up, his sharp eyes locking onto the pint-sized official as he deconstructs the whole conversation. He realizes that Cho didn't just dump all this valuable info for the sake of being helpful. He's trying to bait them into doing the dangerous dirty work. By using the S-Devil crew as tools, Cho can get the results he wants without having to take any of the official responsibility if things get messy. Internally, Mojin is roasting this bald kid for thinking he can manipulate an ancient grandmaster so easily. He tosses out a bit of sarcasm, calling Cho a noble one while asking for his real identity, basically calling his bluff in front of everyone. Robert stands there looking like he's caught in the middle of a lightning storm, realizing the power dynamic in the room just shifted toward the guy in the hoodie. Mojin isn't letting up, pressing Cho on whether the pressing request was just a cover for his real motive for showing up. He stares the official down, waiting for a crack in that childlike facade. Chodane just sits there behind his neck pillow, letting the silence stretch out, refusing to give Mojin the satisfaction of an easy answer. Joe decides to play it cool, telling Mojin that if he isn't interested, they can just end the partnership right here and never see each other again. But as Mojin turns to leave, the official drops the ultimate bait, questioning if Mojin truly has zero ties to the Heavenly Demon sect. It's a calculated jab meant to see if the ancient warrior will finally show his hand. Mojin keeps his answer short and sweet, denying any connection as he walks away. But Cho isn't finished with his power play. The official hops up onto his chair to gain some height, declaring that regardless of what Mojin says, the sect is going to claim every single move he makes as their own. It's a classic political trap no matter what Mojin does from here on out. He's going to be doing it under the banner of the demon sect. Mojin just waves a hand over his shoulder, telling the little official to beat it because he's got things to do. He's over the drama, heading for the viewport, while the two ships, the massive, intimidating demon sect vessel and the S-Devil's space truck float silently in the shadow of a distant planet. The scale of the upcoming conflict is written in the stars, but Mojin is already moving on to the next step, staring out into the vast, shimmering void of space. Mojin finds himself feeling a rare sense of relief. Even though they're annoying and manipulative, he's actually glad to see that the Heavenly Demon sect still produces some genuine talent after all these centuries. He looks up at a bright star in the distance, his mind already calculating the path ahead. Back at his high-tech console, Chodane is surrounded by holographic data streams, looking bored as he dismisses the current generation of talent as being way too immature. He's clearly playing a much longer game than anyone realizes. Meanwhile, back on the S-Devil ship, Robert is finally getting his head back in the game, acting all hyped up and ready to tackle the mission properly now that the shock has worn off. Sunya, the crew's deadpan robot navigator, cuts through the hype with some cold, hard data. She reveals that the original plan is trashed because the destination coordinates have shifted. They aren't heading to the moon Cicerus anymore. The trail is leading them straight to a much colder, more desolate rock. The new target is Genta, the second moon orbiting the Manhwa planet, a place that looks like it was designed for secret labs and bad news. Chodane watches the planetary mapping on his screens, his expression unreadable as the ship prepares to descend toward the cratered, icy surface of the moon. Deep inside a dark industrial corridor on Genta, things have gone from bad to worse. We see a pair of legs in a sleek black suit being dragged unceremoniously across the cold floor, leaving a heavy trail behind. It's Saryeon, and she's clearly out for the count, being hauled along like a piece of luggage by someone who doesn't care about being gentle. The one doing the dragging is a tall, spindly figure that looks more machine than man, pulling the captain toward a massive, dimly lit laboratory. The facility is filled with heavy machinery and glowing blue lights, looking like the perfect place for an inhumane experiment. Seryun is completely limp, her blazing devil fire nowhere to be seen. The figure hauls her up a short flight of stairs toward a glowing surgical table that's just waiting for its next victim. The scale of the room is terrifying, a vast warehouse of scientific horrors. From behind, the lanky kidnapper looks totally focused on the task, ready to deliver Seryun to the man in charge of this nightmare. Seryung's eyes flutter open, her vision blurry as she finds herself lying on the cold floor of the lab. She looks up to see a tall, silver-haired man in a biomechanical suit. It's Ritual, looking like a high-tech Grim Reaper. He notices she's finally come around and asks if she's awakened with a tone that's way too calm for comfort. Ritual is actually impressed, noting that her noble Sichuan Tang bloodline must be the reason she's managed to wake up so quickly. He looks down at her with a mix of scientific curiosity and absolute coldness, while Seryun tries to find her bearings, asking where they are and what he's planning to do. She's trapped, and the man standing over her holds all the cards. Ritual gives her a chilling promise, telling her not to worry because he's going to free her from all her pain and suffering. His version of mercy involves a complete memory wipe, erasing every dark moment of her past until she's nothing but a blank slate. The scene pulls back to reveal a chamber filled with rows of glowing tubes, each holding a body suspended in blue liquid. Saryu future as a meat puppet in the Iron Gangshi project is looking way too real. Ritual stands over a paralyzed Seryun, laying out his grand plan to turn her into a mindless Iron Gangshi. He's all about that simple life of obedience, while Seryun is stuck on the floor, groaning in agony as her body completely refuses to cooperate. He explains that her meridians are totally blocked and her nervous system is fried, making her a literal passenger in her own skin. As he works the controls on a cold, glowing surgical table, the heavy metal restraints snap shut with an ominous click, ready to receive their next subject. The mad scientist tells her to play the part of a good pet and just wait for the inevitable. But Seryun isn't the type to roll over. Even with her body locked down, she's visibly trembling, her spirit fighting the paralysis with pure, unadulterated spite, while Ritual looks down with cold indifference. Ritual's cold blue eye narrows as he senses a sudden shift in the room's energy. Suddenly, Seryun is on her feet, standing as a dark silhouette bathed in a terrifying red glow that radiates off her like heat waves from a furnace. She tells him he's dreaming if he thinks he can dominate someone from the Sichuan Tang clan. Her eyes are glowing a haunting, translucent red, and thick trails of blood are leaking down her face, showing she's pushing her life force past its absolute breaking point to override his paralysis. Ritual's composure slips as Seryun lunges forward, slamming her hand onto his chest. Immediately, a sickening green corrosive energy starts sizzling and eating through his high-tech armor like it's made of wet paper, the poison reacting violently to his mechanical frame. With blood still streaming from her eyes, she breaks down the reality of the situation. It's the pigeon blood poison. Every member of the Tang clan is born with a grain of deadly poison nestled in their heart, a final gift meant to be triggered only when they are ready to embrace death. Ritual can only grunt in agony as the green fumes wrap around his torso. Seryun explains that the more her heart burns with desperation and rage, the more potent the poison becomes, reaching a level where it can melt straight through the toughest metal. She looks like a beautiful demon as she stares him down, her eyes wide and glowing with a mix of madness and resolve. She's totally committed to the end now, telling this ugly monster that they should both die together right here in this lab. Just as she's about to melt him down, the lab's security kicks in, and a spindly mechanical guard lunges at her. It's a chaotic mess of metal and desperation, as the robot tries to restrain her while she continues to pour her poisonous energy into Ritual. Seryun's expression turns to one of pure shock, as a blade or mechanical limb pierces through her arm. A spray of fresh blood paints the dim laboratory air as her suicidal gamble takes a brutal physical toll on her failing body. The entire facility is bathed in shadows and blood as Seryun is violently handled by the machines. High above them, the red emergency beacon starts spinning and screaming, filling the room with a pulsing, rhythmic warning light that signals a total breach. Ritual looks back, his face a mask of annoyance as the base AI blares out an intruder alert. It seems someone just crashed his secret project, and whoever it is has triggered every sensor in the facility. Out on the lunar surface, a red scanning grid washes over Li Mochin's calm face as he looks toward the source of the alarm. Behind him, Robert has finally stopped panicking and suited up in a massive heavy-duty combat suit with dual shoulder cannons, looking ready to level the place. A literal sea of Iron Gangshi robots is charging across the cratered landscape, a glowing red horde of killing intent descending from the hills. But Mulkin just stands there, hands in his pockets, looking bored while Robert prepares to turn the entire moon of Genta into a scrapyard